OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
It's been a pretty astonishing weekend of sport. We're going to be talking about all of it over the next 2.5 hours. You're very welcome along to OTB AM. It's Ger Gilroy and Owen Sheehan with you this morning all the way through until 10 o'clock. As ever, we'd love to hear from you. You can get in touch with us. 0879 180 180 is the number. Or, of course, you can always use the hashtag OTBAM. I'll get you to the Sunday paper review from yesterday if you missed it in just a moment. A quick word about what's coming up for you a little bit later on. Andy Mitten's going to join us to talk to us about Manchester United. We thought it was going to be the story of the weekend, and then Villa put 7 past Liverpool to, at least soften the pain somewhat for Manchester United fans. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on with David Meyler as well. The potential for the country to go back into lockdown and go to level 5, courtesy of the leaks from somewhere along the way yesterday. NEFIT are going to recommend that to the government today. That will be decided on by tonight. But level 5 will be the end of all sports in Ireland, which would have massive impact on Pro 14, would have massive impact on the League of Ireland, in particular on Dundalk's bid for Europa League glory. So plenty for us to get our teeth stuck into there. It would also kill the championship for 4 weeks. So, the GA, the IRFU, the Six Nations, all the horse racing, all of that is up for grabs today. There is a possibility, of course, that they'll go level 4 star, and that star will be to allow elite sport. But we'll deal with that prospect for you a little bit later on. Alan Quinlan is going to talk to us about the restart of the Pro 12, 14 or 16, or the whatever league it is actually going to be by the end of the season. We'll catch up on goings on in the WSL across the weekend, much more besides as well. Let's get into the papers though. Maura Trassany-Kelly and Mick O'Keefe of Teneo Ireland looking through the best bits of the Sunday papers, and then at the end of that we're going to hear from Brian Kerr talking about Manchester United. He was on commentary duty yesterday alongside Steve-O for that one, so stay tuned, we'll be back in just a while.
Wayne Rooney, page 8 of the Sunday Times. So Cavani is the main story in loads of places, and Rooney writes for the Sunday Times and has done for a couple of months now, is generally very, very good. He says, for a start, that he finds Manchester United's transfer policy odd. For instance, on Sancho, why are they paying 100 million for someone so similar to talent that you've already got? He says they should be going for Harry Kane, a genuine number 9. There are not many genuine number 9s in the world right now. And he says that a Kane or a Haaland or someone like Lewandowski would give Rashford and Martial someone to play off and freedom. And he said, I played with both and believe that that kind of freedom suits them, not having the pressure of having to score all the goals. He thinks Greenwood could be a number 9 in future, and even posits the possibility that they could go with Bruno Fernandes as a false 9, a la Roberto Firmino, and maybe that could be a way to fit everybody into the team. But he's kind of scratching his head on the Sancho desperation.
Yeah, and look, I think Man United issues are more substantial than just, I think this is a microcosm of what's happened in the last 5 or 6 years, since the Fergie days. The kind of trawling through various managers, none of them have worked out. This transfer window seems to be another bit of a car crash. I think Wayne Rooney's kind of perception of United, as I was saying, is very much one stuck in the maybe 15, 20 years ago when United should have been buying players like Harry Kane. But you'd have to look at it and say, why would Harry Kane leave Tottenham Hotspur to go to Manchester United at the moment? You'd look at United and you compare them to Liverpool. I know that's kind of, one of the benchmarks comparing against each other. But Liverpool just seems substantially in a better place in terms of a club, how the club is run, how they're managed, the culture, the players. So I take Rooney's point, and I think as a United fan, Haaland would have been the person I would have loved to have brought in. There seems to have been issues with his agent, but he's talking here about Lewandowski, Harry Kane, how United should be, fishing, for fellas better than Edison Cavani. But on the balance of what we've seen in the last couple of years, I don't know why a Harry Kane or Robert Lewandowski would go to Manchester United, to be honest with you, Joe. Yeah,
he's generally quite down on United anyway. I mean, he's talking about where they need to strengthen, and it's in a lot of places. Not least, he says, defensively, he says, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, he's done okay, but you want United fullbacks to put the opposition on the back foot when the team when the team have the ball, rather, and I don't think he does that. And he says Luke Shaw can at times, but you always worry about him from a fitness point of view. And on David De Gea, he says he would absolutely stick with De Gea. He doesn't think that Dean Henderson has suddenly become, quote, proper competition. He's not too worried about United generally. He just thinks fitness is their main issue, and when they get back to full sharpness after the international break, there'll be a big improvement. Maura Trassany, on the footballing theme, seeing as we've jumped off on that with Cavani and Rooney, if you turn over one page we have Arsene Wenger's autobiography is coming out, and they've serialised it across 3 pages. I mean, I would be thinking, geez, Arsene Wenger, such an erudite, intelligent man, and what a career and what an exciting time in football. Let me get stuck into this book. There's a lot I want to know. I mean, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I wouldn't describe it as electric, these 3 pages.
No, like when you think about a few weeks ago when we had little extracts from Champagne Football coming out and we were lapping it up, and like practically queues outside Eason's and other bookshops around the country waiting to get our hands on this book because our appetite was so whetted. Whereas Arsene Wenger has delivered to us what he always did, I suppose, which is dependable stability. And it's grand. Have I learned anything new from these 3 pages? No. Am I going to run out and buy the book? Absolutely not. Will anyone who buys it, will it while away a few afternoons when they're possibly going to be locked down again anywhere in Ireland or England if they're interested in football and nothing to watch? Yes. But I mean, there's nothing new in it. I mean, we all know he came in and he overhauled their diet in particular and their kind of attitudes and standards to training, and then everybody else followed on from that. But he even admits himself that at that stage, that appetite was there in English football and kind of in the mid to late 90s. So, yeah, why I wouldn't be a book reviewer. It wouldn't be very long.
I mean, it's not like you even need him to be massively controversial here, because he's just such an intelligent man, and any time in press conferences where you just get talking about football, it would be full of these great insights, and he's a deep thinker. It just doesn't seem to have much depth here. You know, he talks about the diet, and we sorted that out, and mentions a couple of the players. You know, Tony Adams was battered physically. He didn't like training, is kind of the most interesting thing you hear about him there. Martin Keown, a huge desire to push himself, constantly dissatisfied with his performance. He talks about Bergkamp as a perfectionist. He saw things fast. Again, I don't think any of that would jump out at you as, whoa, there's something I didn't know about these players.
Unless, and let's be a bit kind, like you're absolutely right, footballing intellect is really fascinating, and sometimes you feel you don't get that in those snap post-match interviews. So maybe you don't get it either in an extract in the Sunday Times, and it might need a whole chapter to explain his thoughts. So maybe there's a bit of that going on, that it just didn't lend itself to a small little extract for a newspaper article. And that's what I'm going to hope for anyway.
The extract is over 4 pages.
But there's 4 different sections. I'm trying to be kind here.
I wouldn't be rushing out.
It has that feel. About the most interesting thing he gives isn't the... So there's very little in the way of football that would grab you, genuinely. I mean, I'm sure it has to be there in the book somewhere, and there's nothing on Ferguson. I guess the most insightful thing is page 13, where it gets into his family life, and he talks about his wife having to cope with him. And he talks about, I guess, the guilt. You know, it's kind of an interesting point, I suppose. He says, I know exactly what I owe my partner, that living with a man who was as mad about his profession, who made football his religion, was not easy. I have a number of regrets, as many fathers do, not having been present enough sometimes for Leia, his daughter, and not having had more children. So that is, to be fair, a nice insight. But
and actually, on an interesting note, it's not something men are asked. Like, whenever a woman gets herself into what people would perceive to be a high-powered position that keeps her away from the home, or what people would perceive it to be, or TDs, for example, or ministers, they're often asked, you know, who's looking after the children? How are you balancing all the childcare? Nobody ever asks a man. And I think it's good that here a man actually had an opportunity to say, yeah, I felt that guilt and struggle too, because I'm sure, I mean, I'm not a father. Mick O'Keefe there has children. I'm sure, Mick, you probably have those dad guilt as well, but nobody ever asks you, because only women feel these guilts according to popular culture.
Yeah, I actually found this bit interesting, this bit of the personal side of things, and he does go into a little bit of detail in this. I think for a guy who we followed around, you never really got a glimpse of his family life, and maybe that was deliberate. What I also found interesting as well was he was 47 when he came to England, which is relatively young, obviously, in wider terms. But actually, he makes the point too that he was kind of fully fledged and mature at that stage and had been through a lot. And all the things that would have rattled a younger manager, perhaps, the Arsene Who stuff, and, you know, all the questioning around him and the new style, and that, I think he was very kind of I suppose, settled in himself by the time he got to the UK, which I thought was interesting. But I do think that the most interesting bit, and I think it's because Tony Adams, Ian Wright, Alex Ferguson, all these people who, you know, have written about Wenger already, there's not a huge amount we don't know about him, or not a huge amount that, you know, all the new food and new training methods and that. About the only thing I think that lifts the lid at all is the family stuff, Joe and Moira, that you've both mentioned. Yeah, look, it was, as you say, spread out across 3 pages. Will I be running out the door to buy it? I don't know.
The dad guilt, Mick?
Yeah, I see that, and I see the bit about, look, he's obviously a guy that was obsessed by his work. And, you know, like the thing around the breakdown of the marriage and the guilt and his daughter and all that kind of stuff. You can see, obviously, loves her very much. And I'd say, like a lot of people who worked in high-performing jobs, be it chief executives around the place or other place, they do have regrets around missing large chunks of their family's lives. So, and I say women, high-performing women as well, feel exactly the same thing. So I don't think that's unusual. I think it's very interesting from a sportsbook perspective that he opens up on that, though.
Now, the unusual point almost, more trust, as you said, is that it's a man talking about it. I think generally I agree with you. When female's been interviewed and she's a mother, that comes up, whereas fatherhood doesn't come up as often, and nothing surer than men are just as guilty about the time they don't spend with their kids.
Absolutely. And I just think, you know, we're living in a society now where life is being rebalanced and fairness and equality and all this kind of stuff. And it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. And I think if we're going to do that as well, we have to be kind to men as well. You know, I do find sometimes men are tarred with the same brush. And unfortunately, sometimes there's reason for that. But I do think, you know, men struggle as well. Men struggle with the balance. I think there's more expected of fathers today as well. I think back in my day when I was growing up, my dad was expected to go to work, bring home money, feed us, maybe say hello. In fairness, he did a lot more than that. But I think that's what men were expected at the time. Now they're expected to go out, make a lot of money, come home, help with homework, help out with the under-8s camogie, do a bit of housework, and, you know, probably have a really interesting hobby on the side as well, and date night with yourself. And women always did that juggling. Men probably weren't expected to, and now they have to. And I think that does create internal struggles and probably makes you a bit more tired. I think the life of Ireland's dad today in 2020 is probably a lot more complicated than it might have been, say, even in 1990. I could be totally wrong. What the hell do I know? I'm not a man.
I think that's a fair point. I do think there's a much bigger expectation on dads to be around. And, you know, you talk to people of a different generation and, you know, they kind of say, look, they were at work, there was less pressure to get home, much more reliance on the mum in the home. I think it's a far better balanced situation now, but I think it probably does put pressure on dads to a point. Like weekends in particular are very busy. I think the last 6 months is probably, you know, it's more intense, and, you know, others who'll be on the call, listening in, with young kids in particular would appreciate that, because you're home a lot more, and that's fantastic. But there's a lot of blokes I know are crying out for a bit of corporate travel and a quiet night somewhere overseas to get a night's sleep. But I think it's better balance. I do appreciate that. There probably is more pressure on the modern man, and a better way of saying it, to be around more and to share that workload at home.
Well, we'll see what the Wenger book in full is like. I suspect it'll have more insights than those couple of pages for sure, without necessarily being super controversial. So we've loads to get through here. Frank O'Mara is interviewed in the Sunday Independent, two-time world champion, now battling Parkinson's. That's a really good piece. Landon Donovan on the back page of the Sunday Times. David Walsh writing about his exploits this week. There's a great feature piece on LeBron by Eamon Sweeney. But Diarmuid Connolly, Mick, I suspect you were looking on with great interest during the week. So Colin O'Rourke's piece in the Sunday Independent, he says his display in the 2014 All-Ireland Club Final for St Vincent's and their win over Castlebar Mitchells was the best I have seen in a club game. Power, pace, scoring ability off the left and right. He was creative, an unstoppable force. He scored 2-5 in that match. And he reckons he was about the best footballer in the country as well, 2014 territory. So, Diarmuid Connolly, we saw the good, the bad, at times the discipline was an issue. I think the lingering memory, Mick, will not be, I don't know actually. I think 2 All-Stars was discussed during the week. He only has 2 All-Stars. Mick Foley mentions that. I don't actually know off the top of my head how many All-Irelands he has. He, I think, will be more remembered by the moments of genius as opposed to the CV. Some players, it's the CV goes before them. I think in Connolly's case, there's 5 or 6, 7 clips that people will instantly recall.
Yeah, I think with Diarmuid Connolly, look, I've seen him play since he was coming through, and this is a big thing to say. I think of that whole brilliant generation of Dublin players, and there's probably been 2 or 3 generations if you go back to kind of, let's say, 2010 to 2020, you know, naturally gifted. I think he's probably the most naturally gifted of the whole lot of them, and that's saying a lot, because, you know, there's fellas who made maybe arguably more impact over a longer period of time, like fellas like James McCarthy, Stephen Cluxton, you know, fellas who have made brilliant impacts like Jack McCarthy. But I think for when he was good, he was really, really good, and he was just so naturally talented. Left foot, right foot, his scoring range, his vision, his balance, like football-wise, absolutely fantastic. I actually think the media have been pretty bang on about him this week, in that, yes, he's a flawed character, but like, you know, I think that's why he's even more fascinating. There was a bit of a spark there, and I think teams looked at Dublin and went, you know, where can we get at Dublin? And, you know, you're trying to see, is there 2 or 3 players where there's a chink of, you know, if we get into him, he might react. And I think they probably double down on Connolly a lot of the time. I'm not saying poor Diarmuid Connolly, because he's well able to look after himself and rise above it. But I think the balance has been really good this week. I think he's come out of this, I think, with the plaudits he deserves. You know, I saw some fellas on Twitter talking about the 2 All-Stars. Look, he's 8 All-Irelands, I think 6 with Dublin and 2 with his club. You know, he's won everything that you need to win as a player. Should he win more All-Stars? Like, there's years where you looked at it and you scratch your head and go, look, his impact, you would argue that he should have maybe got them, but then the question comes, well, whose place would he take? And there's always that kind of balance to that. But for me, pound for pound, you know, on his day, probably the most gifted Dublin footballer of the last 10 years, in a generation where there's buckets of talent and buckets of ability.
Well, it was a bit of a disaster for Manchester United. They've been beaten 6-1 by Tottenham Hotspur in their 3rd Premier League game of the season. And I say a bit of a disaster, but it was a total disaster, wasn't it?
It was. There is nothing to console Manchester United fans or staff or anyone that has a feeling for them tonight on today's game. I mean, you know, the only excuse you can give is that the red card on Anthony Martial, who isn't a violent or an aggressive type player, I thought was very harsh. I thought Lamela, if there was cards to be given out, Lamela should have got one, and he didn't get one. And the one of Martial's was rather harsh, I felt, by Anthony Taylor, who's not a rash type referee. He's not one who makes very demonstrative decisions, and he walked very calmly towards Martial and gave him the red. But that had an impact on the game. It was only 2-1 at that stage, 28 minutes gone. Anything can happen from there. But I would have to say the Spurs were playing very well and exposing Manchester United's defence frequently up until that point, just before the incident and the sending off. Spurs had peppered the Manchester United goal with shots and crosses and opportunities, and should have really been 3-1 ahead anyway. So that had a major impact on the game, but you know, still the lack of organisation or fight or determination the Manchester United team after that to keep the score down and keep themselves in the game was startling.
The defence really was all over the place, Brian, and I don't know what to make of the United defence, because we know there's players in there who are liable to make mistakes. He brought in Eric Bailly today. Perhaps he thought he might be better with Maguire instead of Lindelof. But we've seen they can make mistakes, yet they had so many clean sheets in the second half of last season. People thought, well, maybe this defence isn't so bad. I don't know what to make of it. And when you look ahead into the next few games that they have to play, he's going to have to sort that out pretty quick, because he's got Paris Saint-Germain, he's got RB Leipzig, who are another good attacking side. So that's a big concern, United returning to the Champions League. Would you be confident Solskjaer can fix the problems he has at the back? Is it a case of he can do it better with the players that he has, or does he need better defenders?
Well, I think you got to look at the individuals and look over time how things have gone with those individuals. I think Lindelof overall has done okay and has always looked a decent player. He bought from Benfica. I liked him when he played for Sweden. You know, I think he was unfortunate in the match with Crystal Palace, in that the handball, the penalty he was given against him, should never have been given. And I think that put a lot of focus and blame on him has been part of the defence. I think him and Harry Maguire rather together are not a top combination. They both lack a bit of pace, and they both lack speed as well on the turn when his play had been behind them over the top. But they're also burdened by the fact at the moment that neither of the full backs are particularly reliable. Shaw is, I thought Shaw had a dreadful game today. He's had a lot of niggly injuries in and out Wan-Bissaka on the other side is quite a decent defender, but he was caught up in the whole shambles that it was today. David De Gea has had a sticky time. Was he at fault in any of the goals today? Not majorly. You couldn't pick him out and say that was a bad mistake from him. But overall, his form hasn't been very good. But I think there's more serious problem is the organisation of the midfield and the protection provided for that back four. If Manchester United's style, and we've heard much talk about, we're back, we've gone back to the United way. And that's about attacking play and forward attacking players and fast wide players like Rashford and Greenwood, without them playing wide all the time. And Bruno Fernandes has been the creative one off the front behind Martial, and full-backs raiding forward. If that's the Manchester United way, well then there has to be players in the midfield that give a balance to that and that protect and mind the centre-backs when the full-backs are both gone. And at the moment they don't have that. That's where they've been getting exposed as they were today in lots of ways. We're exposed on Son's goal in that, I know Harry came into the middle of the pitch and Maguire goes in after him and gives away the free kick and the ball is stuck in behind him. But there was numerous times today the ball was stuck in behind Shaw or outside Shaw, and he's in too far marking Lamela. Didn't seem to have an organisation about the team, about Matic or Pogba taking responsibility to get across. I mean, it's their responsibility. If Fernandes is an attacking player, well then the responsibility of the two sitters is to mind, protect and fill in vacant spaces where your defenders have gone into advanced positions, or your midfield, the other midfield player, Pogba in most cases, Fernandes always are leaving gaps. And they just didn't do that, and they didn't do it against Brighton either. They were fortunate to get away with the win against Brighton. They were exposed against Palace on the counter-attack. Palace, I think, had less than 25% of possession in the match, but they won the match fair and square 3-1.
To ask you finally on United then, naturally his ex-teammates come out in defence, well not maybe in defence of Solskjaer, well they do to a certain extent, Gary Neville, Rio Ferdinand, Patrice Evra, and they all seem to be taking shots at the top brass at Old Trafford, Ed Woodward and the Glazers. So when does Solskjaer start to come in for criticism? When do you think it's fair to criticise? Because it seemed to me today that Mourinho spotted United's weaknesses and went for them, whereas Solskjaer didn't seem to do the same for his side. We know Aurier is a bit of a weak link. He didn't really attack that side of the top in defence.
They did early in the game and they got the goal from that. But after that, the game started to run away from them, and they conceded 2 goals. I mean, remember, I think it was 2-1 after 7 minutes, Stephen, and United were exposed. So your question really is about Solskjaer. Should he be coming under pressure now? I think he is under pressure. I think Manchester United's manager, we've seen it since Alex went. They've gone through, 3 very renowned managers. David Moyes had a very high reputation when he went there. Van Gaal had a very, very high reputation, and Mourinho, the highest of all currently, I suppose, in terms of his most recent successes at Chelsea before he went there, what he'd done with Inter Milan, what he'd done at Porto, what he'd done at Chelsea in the previous time, and yet they were all worn down by it, and none of them were successful. Mourinho made the case that he said it was his best job ever to get Manchester United to second with the squad of players he had, and he was being very critical of the board. So he moves on, and now they have Solskjaer, who remembered he got the job when he was in on a temporary basis after Mourinho went, and because of the results, I think he went and he had a great run. He won 10 games in a row in all competitions, and suddenly he's the man. Now he hadn't had a brilliant managerial career before that he would have expected to be the manager of Manchester United. He done very well at Molde, didn't go so well at Cardiff, but it was already in bad nick when he got there. We're back to Molde and did well again. Is that preparation for Manchester United? Probably not, for the pressures of the manager's job at Manchester United and the expectancy of one of the biggest club in the world without doubt. So he's definitely under pressure. I wouldn't recommend that they should get rid of him by any means, but I don't have any say in it. I don't think anyone's going to be listened to my opinion too much on it anyway. But given that Pochettino is such a highly rated manager and he's out of work and he's around there must be some thoughts. And as Joe said to me in the earlier discussion, it would certainly take the pressure off those people who make the decisions in the club about players and comings and goings and managers. It would take pressure off them and take them out of the limelight a little bit if they got a new manager.
Then quickly on Jose Mourinho, because it looks like he's brought in 3 or 4 players himself and Daniel Levy who have improved the team. I know it's early days. We won't get carried away with this 6-1 because it is a bit of a freak result, you have to say. But he's also got 2 attacking players, Son and Kane, who are absolutely in fantastic form. You'd expect them to bag maybe 50, 60 goals between them in the league this season. So with that in mind, and as I said, it is early days, do you think he will, as you say, he's targeting a cup? Will he win one of those? Will he get top 4? What's the best they can hope for?
Well, we know that Mourinho's form. He's about trying to win trophies and claiming the glory for it himself. You know, he's very good at putting up the fingers and pointing out how many trophies he's won. Sometimes there might be only a trophy that they won, like a community shield type thing, where you win one match to win it, but he would claim it as a big deal, or the Super Cup or something like that. But he's had an ability to get teams over the line in cup competitions as well. So I actually think that he's already put his focus. We saw him at Manchester United go on to win the Europa League, and it was a piece with Wayne Rooney today, the Sunday Times, where he said that they knew from the quarter-final on that he was determined to win that, to the degree that he put the importance of making the top 4, putting that aside, that his priority was to win the Europa League, which gained him a Champions League spot, guaranteed it the next season, and that's what he did. So I think he's on the same lines already with Spurs. His intention, he put out a very strong team against Maccabi Haifa. He put out a strong team in the 2 earlier rounds also, and they won the match the other night convincingly in the end. He put out a strong team on Tuesday against Chelsea in the League Cup and got through on penalties. The fact that he brought Harry Kane on in the match would indicate it was important. He didn't start the team that played against Newcastle on Sunday, obviously, but I think it's quite possible. But there's a long road to go. They're in the quarter-final, the League Cup, Europa League. You'd have to win There's 6 games in the group, and then you've got another 4 knockout rounds. Which
58 matches.
Oh yeah. Well, I think all round you have to win something like 7. Well, you get through 17 games to win the Europa League, and they're only at the start of that process.
That's good on Tottenham. Just to finish then, Brian, you said during the game, as we all know, it is a blow that Seamus Coman will miss this play-off against Slovakia, the semi-final. He's almost certain to miss the game. Stephen Kenny told us today, a hamstring tweak yesterday in that win for them at Goodison Park. Thankfully Matt Doherty came through today unscathed because he didn't see any time on the pitch.
Unless he got injured getting onto the bus.
Oh, fingers crossed he didn't.
Which, as a manager, you often fear something as massive. Or a fella wakes up in the morning with a creak in his neck. I had a few of them over my years of management. Someone comes to you in the morning and says, "What's wrong?" "On my neck. I don't know what happened."
Slept with the window open.
You have to expect the unexpected when you're managing. Even if you think the players are all in great nick, anything can happen, even in the morning of the game. So you, Stephen, to be hoping the players get through it today.
He did mention as well, he spoke about all his midfield players, the likes of Jeff Hendrick, Jay Malumbi's getting games. A lot of the players who weren't maybe playing in the lead up to the other game are getting matches now. We saw they were a bit sluggish in the game against Finland. Shane Duffy's now playing regularly at Celtic, so we'd expect all the players to be a lot sharper. He doesn't have too many injury concerns, thankfully. So would you be feeling optimistic now going into this game against Slovakia, albeit with very little preparation time?
Yeah, I think I'd be reasonably optimistic. We've an away game where the opposition won't have any supporters. And any difficulties we're having about training and the amount of sessions and getting the messages across the manager wants to get, Slovakia will be having the same problem because their players are dispersed even further away. At least ours are mainly they're in Britain. Shane Duffy obviously in Scotland, the rest are in England. Jack Bourne is here in the League of Ireland, but they're close. Whereas Slovakian players are playing in many countries around Europe, and Hamsik is in China, and they have a couple of players in America as well. So it'll be more difficult for them. Yes, the players have had a lot more football since those 2 games, which were frankly disappointing. Bulgaria and Finland, we didn't play particularly well. You could see signs of what Stephen wanted the players to do in terms of keeping possession, building up the play towards the pitch, full backs in advanced positions, playing out in the back, split centre halves, full backs pushed up. Neither of them looked particularly comfortable on the ball, trying to build up the play from the back. I thought the full back positions were too advanced. When we lost possession, we were exposed. McCarthy doesn't get back quick enough from that advanced position. But they have all had much more football now, particularly, I think, and more importantly, James McCarthy, Horan and Hendrick, the midfield three, who I would say they'll be the three, rather than the three that played in the second game with Finland. The front players, Ada hasn't had much football since then. I think McGoldrick should be coming in that position. Connolly's been playing regularly and playing well at Brighton. O'Dowda has, I have a feeling for O'Dowda. I think he's a good player. Robinson played well for West Brom last week and got a couple of goals. So that's all positive that the players have been getting much more football. So, but don't underestimate how much Slovakia want to win the match as well. They want to qualify for these finals, maybe as much as we do, maybe not, but I don't think it's going to be easy by any means.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station. Off the ball.
Any area you name it, I've had instances of racism thrown at me, and other people I know and family members, etc. So
I don't know. What's an example of that, Simon?
My father being abused at petrol stations while I'm in the cars as a kid, on the hurling GA pitches, every second game, every third game.
A shout from the sideline or from fellow players?
Players, sidelines, you name it.
Off the ball. Weeknights from 7 and weekends from 1.
This is OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
The all-new OTB Sports app. It's all videos, sports news, live scores, interviews, podcasts, all waiting for you. Search OTB Sports on your app store and download now.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
2 minutes past 8 after a remarkable weekend of sport. Owen Sheehan, how the hell are you?
Well, just hanging in there, to be quite honest with you. Everything is a whirlwind at the moment. Everybody's going to get embarrassed at some stage or another. That is the new normal we live in.
I mean, there's a lot going on. It's fair to say there is a lot going on and off the pitch. There is quite a lot to digest. It was a weekend where you were like, what? What happened? What's the story? How's that going? What? And it finished last night with the leaked recommendation that perhaps we're heading towards level 5 as an entire country, which would mean the schools stay open, but no Six Nations, no more horse racing, no championship, no Dundalk in the Europa League, no Ireland soccer matches, unless, of course, some derogations are given. But as it stands in level 5, the country goes to level 5, no sport is allowed, not even elite sport. Level 4, elite sport is allowed. So who knows what's going to happen here. So that's the stuff that's happening off the pitch. There's obviously also the President of the United States having caught COVID, just to add into the mix of the whole thing. And then there's Villa and Manchester United and everything else that happened over the weekend too.
Yeah, remember Trump getting COVID? That feels like about 2 months ago at this point, doesn't it? If we're going to talk about on-pitch action here, the big story from the weekend is Manchester United, isn't it? So, is there an argument you can make against Manchester United getting hammered not being the big story of the weekend?
Well, the fact that Liverpool are the greatest team of all time and they got beaten 7-2. As a lifelong Villa fan, when it went 5-2, I'm not going to lie, I backed both the draw and Liverpool to win. €1 on each of them to just as an emotional hedge. At 5-2, I thought there's balls. Is there some way that this could actually happen? And then it was the beautiful 6th, or was that the 7th? I can't remember. The 6th is the beautiful little finish from Jack Grealish, is it? Or is that the 7th? I can't remember. But certainly I had fear at that point. So yeah, I think that team being beaten 7-2, the week that Jurgen Klopp comes out and says, we're the greatest football team of all time, screw you calling us sloppy, even though you didn't. And then they put in together the greatest, sloppiest defending performance. This is the worst defensive performance I've ever seen, said Jamie Carragher in the middle of it. I've seen teams get beaten 9, but this is worse than that because Villa's finishing was atrocious. Barkley should have had 6.
Yeah, it is not any exaggeration to say that Aston Villa should have scored 11 goals against Liverpool yesterday. That is what should have happened. It is, in isolation, one of the worst defensive performances ever. But if you take it outside of isolation, it gets worse because this is clearly the best team in England at the moment, one of the best teams in Europe, and they get embarrassed like that.
Yeah, I think you're right, though. The Man United story is bigger because Alisson's missing from Manchester United. There's nothing that you can point to from Liverpool. There's nothing you can point to from Manchester United saying, oh, if they only had this thing, then, you know, it would have been okay. There was a red card. Yeah. There was an unfairness in the red card, but the lack of discipline afterwards, their inability to lock things down, the fact they didn't seem to care, that hints at something very deep.
I'm always reluctant to put a red card in a vacuum. I think it always comes from either psychological or tactical, I guess, deficiencies in certain areas. But just at Manchester United, like, this is kind of incredible, isn't it, that we're still having these conversations about Manchester United, that we're still managing to find new lows for this football club. These were supposed to be the things that were happening under Mourinho and Moyes and Van Gaal, and people were supposed to be scurrying away in the background working on these things so that whoever the new manager was going to be, they would come into a brave new world where Manchester United would be a far more solid foundation. It is astonishing that we've still found a new low for Manchester United. Manchester United are the Theon Greyjoy of the Premier League. Like, we've reached a point where the suffering isn't a novelty, like nowhere near a novelty anymore. Like, you're kind of like, Jesus Christ, when will the storyline ever end? What is the point of this? Why are you putting this particular person through all of this pain? Where is going to be the redemption here? Because it doesn't look like the redemption is in sight anytime soon. And when it does happen, how many elements of the old great version of this character of this football team are actually going to remain? And the longer the time goes on, the more you start to think, well, none, exactly. It's going to have to be a whole new deformed version of Manchester United, or perhaps an improved version of Manchester United that will have to come through this, that will actually have a sustainable future of being the best team in England again. But it ain't coming anytime soon.
Shane Hannon, good morning to you. You're a Man United fan, aren't you?
Morning, lads. Yeah, quite an upsetting and disappointing day yesterday from a United fan's perspective.
A new low?
A new low, yeah. Look, I was not optimistic.
Lads, it's Spurs. It was Spurs, and you were like in a position to like make Spurs be Spursy against Jose Mourinho, and it's like, oh, that's it. That is a new low.
I wasn't optimistic heading into yesterday's match. I was actually full of pessimism. But then 30 seconds in, United get a penalty. Bruno Fernandes steps up, does his run and skip, puts it away, and you're thinking, okay, maybe this is going to be our day. And then what happened afterwards, I don't think any United fan ever wants to see that again. It was just horrific. Now, look, the Liverpool result probably numbed the pain for a few hours, but then you wake up on a Monday morning and you remember that Liverpool are still the champions. United are in a far worse position, and we're probably just going to sign a 33-year-old striker today in the transfer window. So it's not a great time to be a Manchester United fan. At
least it's not a one-year deal. It doesn't look like it's the type of thing that's going to be a complete financial millstone around their neck. Although they are paying him far too much money, and everybody else in the dressing room will be annoyed that he's getting so much money. Are they too good to go down? Is that what we're saying here?
Are we at that stage yet?
Yeah. I mean, one spot above the relegation zone. You know, we're not too big to have a. Somebody was linking to Roy Hodgson 10 years ago as the Liverpool manager, saying we're not too big to be in a relegation battle.
The numbing of the pain is an interesting point there, Shane. Like, I guess everything that happened yesterday is just a remarkable string of events. And, like, obviously the whole numbing of the pain was encapsulated by Gary Neville changing his profile picture on Twitter, for example, to Jamie Carragher, being a little bit fed up with Liverpool getting hammered. What a small club mentality to get joy from Liverpool. If that is the sort of sweetener at the end of a miserable day, then that really is the final nail in the coffin for the death of Manchester United as a super club, on the pitch at least.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from with that, but any United fan to watch Aston Villa put 7 past the champions, and everyone's like, oh, it's Adrian's fault. If Alisson was in goals, things would have been different. But the fact is, it wouldn't. It was Liverpool's defence that caused that calamity yesterday, and it might be a small club mentality, but only for a few hours it numbed the pain. And we still have to wake up with the reality that we have a defender in Harry Maguire, who's our captain, who is
Harry Maguire. Horrendous. We haven't even talked about Harry Maguire yet. What were you thinking?
Putrid.
For which bit now? Like, I mean, there are so many different elements of this. Is it the bit where he completely misses his own header? Is it the bit where he tries to make up for that by pulling down Luke Shaw? in the box. This is the bit where he runs away from the free kick backwards while putting the ball down perfectly for the opposition player to take a beautiful, quick free kick. What the worst thing about all this is that Harry Maguire appears to be undroppable. And they actually look around and they're like, oh my God, everybody is worse than Harry Maguire, and Harry Maguire is bad. He is our captain. He is Mr. Marvellous for this Manchester United team. We cannot drop him. And I think that, again, is almost true. Who do you draw? Victor Lindelof obviously got the axe yesterday. Maybe that's kind of indicative of the conversations that have been had as well in recent times. Very rarely will you see a set piece done on Match of the Day, for example, where Harry Maguire gets slated. Of course, he's done marvellous things for his country, so they might feel that he doesn't deserve it. But certainly Victor Lindelof has always been the one who's got the boot stuck into him, and it seems that manifested itself within Solskjaer's thinking before yesterday too.
Yeah, I think the English players get away with a lot within the English media, and everyone kind of had the flak pointed directly towards Victor Lindelof in recent weeks. But after yesterday's showing, I mean, Eric Bailly comes in and has an absolute howler as well, to be fair. But he was good midweek in the League Cup. But from a defensive perspective, it was absolutely abysmal, and Harry Maguire needs to take some share of the blame. He's coming out on Twitter yesterday after the match saying, "Oh, this is we're gonna address this after the international break. The only way we're going to address this, Harry, is if you're sitting on that bench." He was horrendous, and any United fan watching him at the moment has their head in their hands every time he touches the ball with his feet. And we're told, "Oh, he's great at set pieces. He'll get his big slab on the head of corners," but he can't. He gets his head on those corners, but when's the last time he scored from a corner? He's not an £80 million defender, and he makes a lot of United fans angry on this Monday morning.
We've got 2 minutes here before we get to Andy Mitten, and obviously we're going to talk a bit more about this. So what else is going on in the world, Shane? And I know you've got to try and condense it into 2 minutes, and that's a very difficult job, so away you go.
Yeah, we'll skip the United stuff, we'll skip the Liverpool stuff, because you're going to do enough talking about those games, lads, I think. But Arsenal up to fourth in the table thanks to a 2-1 win at home to Sheffield United. Elsewhere in the Premier League, we nearly forgot about Arsenal yesterday. They weren't involved in that cracking days of action from an embarrassing point of view. Yet to pick up a point this season, Sheffield United as well, so that's quite worrying from their perspective. West Ham put an end to Leicester's winning start of the season. The Hammers won 3-0 at the King Power Stadium. Fulham remained bottom following a 1-0 defeat away to Wolves, while Southampton were 2-0 winners at home to West Brom. And meanwhile, the Republic of Ireland squad will train today ahead of Thursday's Crunch Euro 2020 playoff against Slovakia. Stephen Kenny has called up Nottingham Forest defender Cyrus Christie and Burnley centre-back Kevin Long to his squad for that match in Bratislava. Christie replaces Everton captain Seamus Coman, who withdrew from the squad on Sunday with a hamstring injury. Katie Taylor's fight with Miriam Gutierrez has been confirmed for the 14th of November at the Matchroom Fight Camp. The Bray boxer will take top billing on a world title triple header in Essex. Gutierrez has won all 13 of her pro fights. Novak Djokovic aims to continue his impressive run at tennis's French Open today. The world number one is yet to drop a set as he looks to reach the last 8, with victory against 15th seed Karen Khachanov of Russia. Before that, women's 7th seed Petra Kvitova takes on China's Zhang Shuai for a place in the quarterfinals. And finally, some golf. English star Aaron Rai has a second European Tour title, lads, after a dramatic conclusion to the Scottish Open. He won a playoff with fellow countryman Tommy Fleetwood after the pair ended on 11 under par. Rai was the runner-up of the Irish Open 7 days previously, and he also won the Hong Kong Open back in 2018. Final round of 67 as well saw Padraig Harrington finish on 7 under in a 5-way tie for 9th, so a top 10 finish for him. And finally, 2017 Masters champion Sergio Garcia won the Sanderson Farms Championship on the PGA Tour. It was the Spaniard's first PGA Tour title since 2017 and his 11th overall.
Shane, as a United fan, before I let you go, do you want Pochettino in over the international break? Are you at that stage now that this has to stop, or does it actually matter? Is there, while the hierarchy of the club are still there, it's almost irrelevant who the manager's going to be? It's
irrelevant. I think Solskjaer, let him have another 6 months and focus on Ed Woodward, the man that the cameras zoomed in on yesterday. He's the rotten wood of the club. So if anyone needs to go, he does. Shane, good stuff. More from Shane across the day on otbsports.com. And of course, if you want any more of your sports news or information, the best place to get it these days is on the OTB Sports app, which you can get in the App Store. Just search OTB Sports and you can download it there. It costs you nothing, and it has all of our audio. You can listen to our radio stream. You can watch all our video on it. And we update it with breaking news and all the best stuff from the shows that you might have missed as well. So it's the easiest place to catch up on everything. I haven't mentioned yet, Owen, that Athy won the Kildare County Championship after a fairly dramatic final catch from the ageless Mick Foley. The best use of the defensive mark that I've ever seen, if only
was it Ratoath who got beaten in the 69th minute of the Meath final? If only they had somebody on the edge of their square to catch that ball, then they too would be county champions. Have I got the teams wrong? Ratoath won. Sorry, Gail.
Ratoath won, yeah.
Gail Colm-Kill who didn't have somebody. That's the way. I don't know if you've seen this yet, but like there's 6 minutes or 6.5 or 7 minutes of stoppage time, which is allowed, and 9 minutes into the stoppage time, you can see the goal that cost your team the county final. I'm like, did clock stop working? And what's going on here?
Like, I mean, obviously the elephant in the room here is how did Athy celebrate? Was the
quietly,
street?
I'm sure. Quietly.
Was the street kind of vacant and empty after that? Was there a parade in the main street of Athy?
Did they march their traditional route like Blackrock did? We'll come back to that a little bit later on in the pressure rankings, I think. It's 15 minutes past 8 this morning, and we are joined now by Andy Mitten. Andy, difficult circumstances for football fans of teams who get so annihilated in public as Manchester United did yesterday. How are you doing, sir? How are you?
I'm okay. I've had better weekends, various reasons, but I'm sure many Manchester United fans can relate to that. I was at Old Trafford yesterday. I went into the ground with optimism. I think I'll always do that, even when Manchester United are terrible. I always think they're going to win. And the optimism can vanish after 10 minutes if they don't start well. But, 31 seconds into yesterday's game, I was sat right opposite where the penalty was awarded. And I thought, this is it. It's going to be a fourth straight win. Bruno put the ball in. And clearly I was completely wrong, because within a few minutes, United's defence had fallen apart, committed a series of basic errors, and Tottenham were ripping through Manchester United's midfield and defence. And I've seen a 6-1 defeat before at Old Trafford, but even that was only 1-0 at half-time against Manchester City in 2011. Tottenham were unforgiving. Manchester United were dreadful. It got even worse when they went down to 10 men after Anthony Martial was sent off. He was stupid, no doubt, but the way that Lamela went down was risible. And it was just a pretty flat, horrible day. Walked away from the ground, sort of reeling at the result, and then watched a little bit of Liverpool and was thinking, and saw Leicester's result and was thinking, this is crazy. It's not just the football at the moment. There's obviously the transfer window. So I spent the first half of yesterday writing about Edinson Cavani, and that came out the blue. And I called his old strike partner, Diego Forlan, in Uruguay. I thought, he knows Cavani far better than I do. He knows what it's like. And I just said, be straight with me. Can he still play? And he said, yeah, absolutely. So he was quite positive about Cavani. And I felt conflicted, because I do actually think he'll do well. But the signing also smacks of, not desperation, but unplanned anti-cultural reboot, which Ed Woodward had talked about with Manchester United. Cavani's 33. He's the same age as Messi. He'll be on good money. United have tried to sign him twice before, and money was the obstacle, but needs must. I think Odiyanigolo is not to the required standard, and I think you're going to see more activity today. Alex Telles, the Brazilian left-back from Porto, he's going to sign as well, and I know United are trying to get more transfers done by the end of transfer window. And having watched the game against Spurs, I think it's fair to say they need those transfers to be done, because the team is well short. It wasn't just a one-off that. United were lucky to get anything at Brighton in the league, and they've lost the first 2 home games at Old Trafford for the first time since 86, 87. I'm old enough to remember those games. And by the end of October, it was clear that the manager was going to be sacked, and he was. Alex Ferguson came in at the start of November, and the rest was history. But this team are a long way from the greats of Fergusons.
Sorry, Andy, I was just going to ask, what are you seeing, what are you hearing yesterday? You compare it to the 6-1 before, but there were fans that day. I mean, you could hear everything, I'd imagine, yesterday.
Yeah, you could hear everything. And I put a picture online outside Old Trafford before the game. It was just empty. It's just really sad. The shops boarded up and up for sale, and that whole match day economy has just died. And United We Stand is part of that. Not that we've died, because we've got other ways of putting our fans in out there. But I was thinking this might take 2 months, but it's gone right on now. And I walked right around the ground. I walked like a mile around the ground, and the security is amazing at United, but what does that mean? There's no fans there, and the atmosphere inside the ground, it's weird. I don't like it. Is it better than nothing? It probably is. You could hear the players. I quite enjoy that. I find that I watch the games really closely, because I sometimes watch the fans. I listen out for the songs that they sing. I like the terrace culture. I've long written about the fan culture. And 20 metres in front of me yesterday, Tottenham's players were dancing and going absolutely crazy, all for the benefit of one TV cameraman. So it's slightly surreal. You got to watch the game very closely, because was there a goal there? It's weird, and maybe it was a good thing that fans were not inside that ground yesterday. I'm not sure the result would have been the same if fans were inside the ground. It's got to be a factor. I don't think would Villa have beaten Liverpool 7-2? Maybe with fans it would have been 8-2. But no, it's changing the results, changing the way that the teams play. I think the players are still absolutely trying. I don't think there's any question of that. I mean, United's players just made loads of mistakes yesterday. And Tottenham were excellent, I've got to say, they were excellent. And I don't blame Jose Mourinho for pushing and pushing for more and more. I'd do exactly the same. But you can hear the individual cries. You can see, the manager goes back to the bench and slams the seat down in frustration. You can hear the seat slam down. And United lost 6-1 at home to Tottenham. It's an absolutely shocking result. And they conceded 11 goals in the first 3 league matches. So all that optimism which built before and around the lockdown, and the club acted very well too, and Fernandes was a game changer in many ways, and the team stayed unbeaten. Only got to the two semi-finals, but looked still a long way from winning any of those trophies: Europa League, FA Cup, League Cup. But all of that has vanished, because that was built on a pretty good defence as well as Fernandes. The whole team were playing well. They're all playing dreadfully at the moment. All of them. I can't think of one who comes out at the start of this season with much credit. Pogba's been dreadful. Fernandes has just been tries, but nothing's happening. The whole of the defence. That defence were not actually bad for most of last season, but the form of them has just fallen off a cliff. And I think the manager's got to take some of the blame as well, because he's spent a lot of money. Some of these are his players, and it's very worrying for Manchester United fans.
Is the main worry that Harry Maguire is not playing well and is making mistakes? Because, Lindelof obviously carries the blame. He's not on the team, but actually the defence gets worse when Lindelof comes out. And the point about the sending off is obviously very important. It has an impact on the end of the game, but it certainly didn't have an impact on Spurs going 2-1 up, because they were 11 aside at that point, and Spurs were already beginning to show where the threat was, and Manchester United had already shown that they were making defensive mistakes.
You're right. Spurs were shredding United long before Martial was sent off. Maguire had a terrible game. Bailly started because he's fit. He's played really well in the 2 League Cup games away at Luton and Brighton. He didn't start last week. The coaches still feel that there's a mistake in Bailly and that he's injury prone. Now, he doesn't want to be injury prone, but the coach has got to make the decision. So, and with Lindelof, they felt that maybe he has been coasting because of lack of competition, and that he's played well in the past. One of his best games was against Manchester City, and he'll play well in the future. But Bailly deserved his chance. I don't think anyone complained when the team was named yesterday, but after a few minutes, he wasn't taking it. He was as culpable as the others. Him and Maguire had awful games. The whole back four did. Aaron Wan-Bissaka had a good season until the end of last season. And I don't know if there's other reasons for his form dropping so badly, but it has done. And going forward, he's just not like a right back at a top football club should be, in terms of his ability to cross and his distribution. Defensively, he's much better. Luke Shaw's going to have a lot more competition now. if you would have asked me 6 months ago, I would have thought that would have come from Brandon Williams, but I think the club would let him go out on loan. So that's why they brought Alex Telles in. And the club still feel they're well short of players in several positions, and the coaches are frustrated that players have not come in. It's been a really limp transfer window. Only one player has come in so far, and that inactivity, that failure to bring players, but also to move players on, has just seen the mood dip and dip. And then when that Palace defeat happened for the first game of the season, that was the incendiary to set off a feeling of just utter frustration among the supporters. And the season's lurching, so there were 3 consecutive wins before yesterday. United have not lost an away game since January. It's the best run since 1999, and I'm sort of pulling statistics here because you can swing either way with how it's going, but I don't think it will be acceptable if the team are winning 4 out of 14 first league games like last year. There's increased pressure on Ed Woodward, the leading executive, and also the Glazer family. They've never been popular. They never will be popular. I don't think any owners of Manchester United have ever been popular. Martin Edwards wasn't popular. David Gill wasn't popular. That's just the way that it is. But fans see the Glazers just taking out the dividends. In mitigation, they've spent a lot of money. Managers have spent a lot of money. They've just spent it pretty terribly. And I thought that Ole Gunnar had a better eye for recruitment, and I think the players that he's brought in, they were doing well. But Dan James is another one. His form's just fallen right off. And if you're the manager, you've got to get the best out of the players, especially the ones you've brought in yourself. So opinions are changing, they're shifting. I still think that United fans would love to see Ole Gunnar come good as a coach, but I'd be lying if I said there were no doubts.
Like that does seem like more of a hope rather than an expectation at this point. And after today, Andy, there is nothing more. Not that they did much, but there's nothing more that Ed Woodward can do. You can criticise. Manchester United fans will be critical of how inactive Manchester United were for the last couple of months. But if things get worse, there is one head that can roll that might make an instant difference, and that is Solskjaer's. It is the fixable thing. It may not be fair, but that will be the fixable thing over the next month, 2-3 months. How likely is that going to happen, that they will actually make that decision if things do get worse?
It's dependent on results. You saw last year that things got pretty bad by the October. I think United were 14th going into the game against Liverpool. And I don't think that'll be acceptable. Again, I don't think anyone wants to sack Solskjaer, especially at the club, because they pinned their hopes on him. And there's talk of this cultural reboot. And I've written the cover of the new 442, and there's lots of optimism in there because there are good things happening. I see that as a journalist. I speak to loads of people inside the club, and I've done for years. I've done United We Stand for 31 years. I've got contacts everywhere, and the youth system is looking much better. The mood has definitely been much better, but the mood is also dependent on results. And there's a scrutiny and pressure around Manchester United that maybe you'd only also find at Liverpool or Barcelona or Real Madrid, or maybe the clubs in Milan or Bayern Munich. And if results continue to go badly, I think the mood would, obviously more people would doubt Ole Gunnar, but the mood would also go against the Glazers and Ed Woodward. But what's the alternative? What's the plan B? It's not like fans can say there's a rival ownership challenge. This is a club at the moment which is hemorrhaging money because of the COVID situation. Yesterday was another home game without fans, another £4.2 million lost. So maybe that brings the price of Manchester United down. But there's a lot of economic uncertainty. To be fair, United have looked after their staff. They've not furloughed the staff. The players are still being paid. But I think the next set of financial results will be poor. So the only thing that can sort of lift all that is the team playing well and results being good. And if that doesn't happen, you've got a major problem there. I don't know when the manager will get sacked. I don't know if he will get sacked. I don't want him to get sacked. I feel that United tried with the David Moyes, and then a different type of manager with Van Gaal, and then another different type with Jose Mourinho, and then they're trying, the nice guy Ole Gunnar, and can nice guys win? I'd like to think so, but he's under a huge amount of pressure because the players that he wants are not being brought in, and the club are saying it's difficult to bring players in, and the fans are saying we're not really buying that because we know that they're not funded in the same way as City or Chelsea, but Tottenham have managed to bring good players in. We saw that yesterday. Liverpool have managed to bring good players in as well. Didn't see that yesterday. So there's got to be minimum expectations. It's Manchester United. It's losing games at home 6-1 is simply not acceptable. Losing consecutive home games is not acceptable. And a lot of people are culpable for those results.
How much do you expect today in terms of activity apart from Telles and Cavani? Is it your understanding that there will be other players coming in?
Yeah, I know they're definitely trying to get players. The two I probably know most about, because my connections would be Facundo Pelestre from Uruguay. I wrote that story at the start of July. My source for that story was Pelestre's manager, Diego Forlan, and knowing that Ole Gunnar had spoke to him. He's an 18-year-old right winger. And then I checked that out with the club because no one had written it. And they said, yeah, it's true. I don't think he would be brought into the first team fold. He's not ready yet. Certainly what his manager told me. But a very exciting prospect. I'm understanding that that's set to happen. It hasn't happened yet. And as we know, transfers can break down. With Dembele, I was told on Friday, Barca publicly, not for sale. He's got a big future here. Privately, if we get a big enough offer, we'll sell him. And I was also told, and this is, I've watched Barca very frequently for 20 years now. I've got decent contacts there. And my best one said, Barca want to bring two players in. Memphis Depay, remember him, and Eric Garcia, who's in the city of Manchester. And they won't be able to bring either in unless they get some money in, and that money they expect to come from Dembele. Will it happen? I don't know. I just know the circumstances around it, and I know the sources are telling me that information. United's perspective on that was that they wanted a loan, didn't want to be paying 60 million, 70 million, whatever. Dembele cost 105 million euros when he signed from Dortmund, but he's had bad injuries. He's incredible when he's fit, and he's fit at the moment, but he hasn't been the success that Barca fans hoped that he would be. So there could be movement there, and United are still been trying to get Sancho, but will it happen? I don't know. I just know there's the circumstantial evidence around it, which is United want him. Dortmund have long maintained they're not budging on the fee. I understand the player wants to join Manchester United, and we'll know by the end of today whether that happens. I cannot see United paying 120 million in these COVID times for any footballer. Will the desperation of yesterday's results mean that they do? I doubt it, but I'm not the club's financial officer. I just write what I told and try and well source the information that I write.
Andy, last question for me is there a bang of Groundhog Day off things at the moment where if they go 4 wins from the first 14 games, the manager will get sacked, a new manager will get picked. It's the same people making the selection on the manager and ultimately deciding whether or not they're going to back him in the transfer market, that the cultural reboot hasn't happened and there's no real sign of that happening?
Yeah, that's absolutely fair comment. And what a sorry tale. I mean, that cultural reboot was explained to me face to face by Ed Woodward last October. And okay, let's take it at face value. Let's see if you're right. Yeah, it's true. Maguire looks decent. Wan-Bissaka looks decent. Dan James looks decent. Bruno Fernandes would come in and look decent. But the mood and the facts have shifted against that now. And this well-planned recruitment policy, which he explained, does not look well planned from the evidence of the transfer window so far. If the targets come in who United have been trying to get, then then great. There'll be some people saying United have done well here, but even then there's a groundhog feeling. I compared it to 15 under Van Gaal. Season started pretty terribly. Went out and bought Di Maria, Falcao, then beat QPR at home 4-0 after the international break. And yeah, this is the Man United, they're back. And I bought into it. And then the team lost 5-3 at Leicester. So there's definitely a groundhog feel. And I don't think there's much appetite for just a continuation of that going round and round and round, where United stay third and fourth and nowhere near winning the league. They've not put a decent title challenge in since 2013. That said, and people don't know this, I think it's harder for any club because every Premier League team now is financially much stronger than they have been historically. United used to be able to go and get pretty much any player they wanted. That's just much more difficult now. And the funding structure of Chelsea and Manchester City, that wasn't an issue in the 90s when United was so dominant. It was United and Arsenal with two brilliant managers. And Liverpool struggling because they were going through the same sort of cycle that Manchester United seem to be going through now.
Briefly, Andy, just before we wrap up then, if the manager in wait, if Solskjaer does get sacked, is Pochettino, does that change things dramatically? Because perhaps the cultural reboot comes as a result of having a figure like Pochettino as your manager.
Yeah, if Ole lost his job today, he'd be the number one favourite, no doubt about it. I wrote about him in 2016. I wrote about two people who I thought should get the United job. Ryan Giggs, and got slaughtered for that. He had approval ratings of about 8% from Manchester United fans. But that was, I felt that he should get a job after Louis. And then Pochettino, obviously a very, very, very good manager. Part of me feels even uneasy speculating about it because I still hope that Ole Gunnar does well. And I don't want to get into this other cycle of like, if he doesn't win at the weekend, then he's going to lose his job, because I've got absolutely no evidence of that. And the club have shown that they'll stick with the manager during the real tough points of last year. He just needs to get his team winning again, because it's been a really turbulent start to this season. And he'll have his reasons. You know, the teams who played in Europe in August haven't started the season well. There's been these freak results, but I think after 10 games of the season, you've got to start looking and saying, is there a continued improvement here, or is this team still wildly inconsistent?
Fair point. Good stuff. And, you know, it's good that you will come on and speak to us in the aftermath of a difficult weekend, Andy. Thanks a million.
Thank you.
That's Andy Mitten there, the editor and publisher of United We Stand, and, of course, a journalist you can read in 442 and The Athletic as well. Now, OTB Sports, in partnership with Cadbury FC, have kicked off a brand new series of in-depth chats with some of the biggest names in world football. The third episode is in the books. Gary Neville and Teddy Sheringham sat down for an in-depth chat. It's going to be brought to you on OTB social channels and on OTB Sports Radio today. Some great stuff in this. Some of the online stuff has already sparked a massive reaction, as you would expect. We think you'll particularly enjoy the chat. Check out cadburyfc.com for updates on promotions and giveaways. And a reminder, we're live this morning in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. If you were a Man United fan and Pochettino was there just kicking his heels, you'd want him in, right?
Yeah, now more than ever, because it does seem, as Andy was talking about there, that the ability to go out and spend their way out of this problem is not going to be an option. They simply need 5 or 6 players at this point to turn the ship around. So that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen today. It's not going to happen probably in the next 2 windows either. And one way of fixing that is trying a new manager. It's harsh and it's brutal on Solskjaer. That is looking like it might be his fate. But it realistically is the only option. You can give out about the Glazers all you want. That is not going to change. That is not going to move. You can give out about Woodward, but the people above him, well, they think that he's done a good job because he's relatively done okay commercially. Probably. The one head that can roll and is fairly movable is that of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, as much of a club legend as he is. And it doesn't help his case that there is a top quality manager lying in wait. Right,
it's 8:39. Let's move on to the other massive story from football yesterday, and that was the annihilation of Liverpool at the hands of Aston Villa. I'm delighted to say David Meyler is with us. David, what the hell happened?
I don't even know where to start with analysing. I think it was it's just a really, really bad day at the office, a calamity of defending errors, and they were punished. every chance that Aston Villa got, they scored. Albeit, yes, there was 2-3 deflections in some of the goals, but it was just one of those days where every Liverpool player, probably Mo Salah was the only one who, he could turn around and say, well, I got 2 goals, but it was just a really bad day at the office, and just too many defensive errors, playing that high line, getting caught out all the time, turning over chances, and they were punished.
Explain to us a little bit about how having the world's best goalkeeper is such a fall-off. Can you put it down a little bit to that there's an early mistake from the goalkeeper and suddenly the confidence drains from the team?
We saw Jurgen Klopp speak after. He said these things happen. They've happened in the past where, it happens so early into the game that you feel you can bounce back. It's just, even if you go back to the smallest of things, which, I've not really seen anyone talk about it, but if you look at even the pass Andy Robertson plays back to Adrian, it's probably a 30-yard pass, but the ball bounces into him rather than, if it's on the floor and he gets it under control quicker. It's almost, it's early in the game, it's sloppy, he just kind of hits a blind pass, and then, it's a calamity. But when you do have someone like Alisson in goal, it's almost, you think we're fine. Because, if the defence makes a mistake, you think, my goalkeeper can dig me out. But then when Adrian makes that mistake, doubt does start to creep in. That's normal. And then it just, to concede 7 goals. If Alisson had been playing, you think, what could he have done differently? I don't think the first goal happens. The deflections are just unlucky, but it would add more confidence into the team, and he would be demanding, that the defenders are playing better, and, the spaces that they're giving up wouldn't have happened, I feel, anyway.
The other thing that we just need to talk about is that there were a load of freak results as well. We didn't even mention Leicester being annihilated by West Ham. This was a Leicester team who played really well up to this point, and they're coming off the back of a really good season last year, and they've built on that squad. And so how much of this has to do with the fact that there are no crowds, and so players are responding in different ways? Some players are actually emboldened to try stuff that they wouldn't normally try. There's no nervousness, so they're actually getting the best out of them, and other players are a little less turned on by the fact that there's no crowds and it's just a training game.
I spoke to Nathan not so long ago, and we were chatting about it. It's almost like some of the games do have a feel of, kind of friendly games or training games behind closed doors, that there's always one team kind of seems to dominate the other team, and they go and, punt the team 4 or 5-0 in training. It's almost a certain, if you look at Leicester obviously hammering Man City, and then they go to the following week and they get pumped by Man City. It's just, it's surreal to believe. Then you look at Manchester United losing, and then you look at Liverpool getting hammered. It's just, there is a certain thing without fans that the games would probably be a lot different. Certainly for the home teams, because I think, the fans would rally behind them. If you imagine if at Villa Park yesterday, if Aston Villa had, whatever it be, 40, 50,000 at the game, they'd have been bouncing off the roof, which would have, you don't know, would they have then, once they'd gotten, a few goals ahead, would they have dropped a little bit deeper? Would they have continued to, push forward and create so many chances? I do think the fans does play a part in it, but at the same time, some of the stuff we saw yesterday was very, very basic defending. That was it just looked like players had the wrong boots on their feet. They couldn't do anything. They were just getting caught off. A great example is, for the second goal of Ollie Watkins, they try and play, Joe Gomez tries to play offside rather than just holding the line and going back with the player. He jumps forward. And if you get that wrong, you can't make that recovery run. You can't get back. And I just think that, with certain things like that, and without the fans, like you asked me, there is a kind of a risk element that players aren't afraid to try things, because you can imagine the crowd would be on their back, or there'd be jeers and all that. So it does make a difference, yes.
And my point is that I don't think we can automatically say a whole team are going to be impacted. It's individual players within the team, and then some teams are impacted, like the lesser teams who might not try stuff against the better teams because they know that if something goes wrong, the crowd, what are you trying that for? We're supposed to scrape a draw here today. Whereas actually they try something, it doesn't come off. Next time they try it, they've actually learned from it. And for the big teams, you're at it every week. You're like playing in Champions League finals. There's a sense of occasion every single time you play, brought by the noise and the sound of, like, the wall of sound that comes from the Liverpool fans in particular. If that's suddenly gone, and it's not that you're not professional, but like, what's the point of the crowd if it's not to actually give you an extra little bit of juice, a tiny little bit of juice, which makes you feel like a superstar and slightly immortal, and suddenly that's gone.
No, you're completely correct. You look at Liverpool, Anfield has been a fortress for Liverpool. There's always that famous thing, the Kop end up sucking in, the ball into the goal and what have you. That when they do play at home, yes, I know they were away against Aston Villa, but at the same time, when teams are at home and you have, if it's a big club, you have 50, 60, 70,000 at the game, it does add an atmosphere. Like, for teams, then the players do, yes, it is individually, players do get nervous if, at times, Jesse, if you look at Aston Villa, if they were at home and then players aren't early on in the game, if passes aren't starting to come off and there's the from the crowd, players do get nervous and they stop wanting to get on the ball and stop trying to find those killer passes. Whereas all you have now is your teammates kind of moaning at you, which you can brush to one side. So it does make a massive difference. But at the same time, if you look at like the Manchester United and Tottenham game, you look at the Liverpool Aston Villa game, that defending is something you'd see, on a Sunday training ground or whatever, Sunday match at the local park with the lads. Like, the defending was just awful. If you look at, I think it's Nombele's goal for Spurs, like, they're just all over the place. Maguire, like Shaw, it's just
comedy. That was comedy stuff.
It was like, what's going on? If you look at it, I know there's a freeze image of when Big Harry goes to head the ball. You've got to head that ball back to here, like, to leave it short. And somebody who's very good at heading a ball. And then even just after Martial gets sent off, he puts the ball down, tries to play, they try to play out from the back, and you're thinking, you've just gone down to 10 men, you're losing. Like, let's be solid and let's, like, build on this. Do you know what I mean? Instead, they just get to half time with the result it is, and then we can regroup. Like, it's just all the stuff across the two games. Yes, Aston Villa were fantastic. Let's not take away from them. They did everything correct in the game. They created chances, but not only did they create them, they took them. But then same with Spurs. Like, even before Martial was sent off, they were dominating the game. So that was inevitable that they were going to win the game unless something drastic happened, Manchester United's performance. But it's comedy stuff.
David, just to go back to the idea of this being like training games, like, I can't imagine if Liverpool are playing a training game and one of the teams in training that has Gomez, Van Dijk, Robertson and Trent Alexander-Arnold are conceding 7 goals in any training game. Like this is the thing, like, they conceded 7 goals. They could have conceded 11, 12 goals. Like, it's extraordinary, the drop-off. Like, we can't surely put that down to fans. We can't put this down to individual mistakes.
No.
There has to have been something else we saw yesterday.
I was going to say if I were Liverpool, which I am, a Liverpool fan, which I am, I wouldn't read too much into it. I think it was just a generally really bad day at the office. Everything in the game just went against Liverpool. They got everything wrong. I think, you have your good days, you have your bad days. But this is still a team that's off the back of winning a Premier League. They had a fantastic year, like, before losing to Manchester City by a point and winning the Champions League. It's not as if it's become bad overnight. Do you know what I mean? That this is like, this is a sign that Liverpool aren't where they're at. I think it was just a really bad day where everything went against them. Like, now they've got the international break. They've got everything coming up soon. You'd nearly, like, the beauty of it is Liverpool could come back and, like, obliterate Everton. In that sense, like, it's whether or not, how long is Alisson out for? And then you've obviously got Henderson, Thiago coming back in. They're talking about Matip being fit. You're hoping Mane is back. And then it's just a different dynamic of the Liverpool team. I wouldn't worry too much in the sense that I think they will come straight back and bounce back from it. Whereas on the flip side of that, you look at someone like Manchester United, it just, there's warning signs everywhere. Are they going to bring in players in the transfer window? Like, we saw Patrice Evra talking yesterday. People are always like, who's the ideal partner for Harry Maguire? Is it Lindelof? Is it Bailly? Should they drop Harry Maguire, play Lindelof and Bailly? There's just so many different things. Whereas I think Liverpool, on the other hand, it's kind of, okay, we've had a bad game. Let's not panic. We are only a few games into the start of the season. they'll come back, they'll bounce back. I still expect Liverpool to be thereabouts at the end of the season, whereas other clubs who have started well, you can slowly see them fading away.
Can I ask one question about Liverpool that is like most worrying would be that other teams have been creating chances against them as well. Now, Leeds have been brilliant, right? So Leeds will create chances. But Leeds, essentially, there was a couple of chances that they created by somebody kind of in the quarterback position, kicking the ball over the high line and somebody running onto it. That happened a lot last night for Villa. Like there were, 4 or 5 times in the first half and then again the whole second half. Have teams, obviously with the evidence and the amount of work that's being done, have they found a way to counteract Liverpool's high line that Liverpool are now going to have to deal with in a way that perhaps the Premier League was less self-confident against them in recent seasons?
No, of course. When you concede 7 goals in a game, you're going to have to, like I can imagine this morning, Jurgen Klopp is sitting down with his coaches and his assistants, and they're analysing the game. Like they'll have to think, where did it go right? Well, it didn't really go right anywhere. Where did it go wrong? And then they'll identify parts that, yes, you look at the Leeds game, that was just crazy. In the sense, the same thing. Like Liverpool are renowned for their fullbacks bombing on. There's always been this, fascinating thing that Kenny Cunningham said about Fabinho. Yes, he's an exceptional footballer. Does he read the game defensively better than Henderson? That's one thing. Like, it does probably get knocked on its head, the amount of work he does to cover Trent Alexander-Arnold. Or if you look at Aston Villa's goals, a lot of them came from the left-hand side with balls coming back across. That if Henderson was playing in that holding midfield role, would that happen? But I think Liverpool will go and they'll look at it. And let's not forget, Jurgen Klopp is an exceptional manager. He'll be well aware of what's gone on, and they will tweak it. They will, they can't keep conceding, this many chances in games, because you can't have to score 4 goals to win a game. Like, I know, like Aston Villa scored 7, but I can't see that Liverpool team conceding 7 again anytime soon.
David, just before we wrap, just it'd be good to get your take on the Seamus Coleman injury over the course of the weekend. How big a setback is this ahead of Thursday night?
Well, Seamus is in fantastic form. Everton are 4 out of 4. They've been flying. Seamus has been pivotal to that. We've seen Carlo Ancelotti come out and speak so highly about him. And then obviously I believe it's his hamstring, which is not great, because then obviously this is a huge game for Ireland, and then your captain picks up a knock and he's out of the game. It's almost a good thing in a way that Matt Doherty didn't play, so that there was no fear of him picking up a knock, because look, it's a straight shoot-off between the two of them. If you looked at, the last campaign, or the last international games, Matt had a shoe in. I think Seamus at the moment was ahead of him with the performances he's put in at Everton. So, it's a big disappointment, but I imagine the type of character Seamus is, I imagine he'll probably still travel over, to be in around the squad, to support them, to be that captain, to be that leader around the place, even though he won't be featuring.
Great to have you with us, David. Thanks a million for joining us.
Cheers, guys.
That's David Meyler giving us some thoughts there on a remarkable night football from Liverpool's perspective and from Villa's perspective. Villa were brilliant. That's the other part of this zone that we haven't talked about enough. That midfield where McGinn is fully fit and playing well, like the Villa fans were definitely, McGinn was more important to them than Grealish when they got promoted. Grealish obviously gets all the headlines, but that was great. And Ross Barkley settled into the team pretty quickly, apart from his finishing in the first half. And that's a pretty exciting trio to be watching.
Oh, like incredible. And what a start to the season. Like, this is a game that a lot of people would have seen maybe a little bit of an issue for Liverpool in terms of, it might take them a while to go 2 goals up, for example. Nobody expected this specific type of issue. But Joe Gomez getting nutmegged by Jack Grealish. It's like, hold on a minute, has Jack Grealish just become Maradona all of a sudden? What has happened here?
Did you predict Villa were going down at the start of the season in our predictions?
Oh, yeah.
Everybody predicted Villa were going down and that Dean Smith was going to get sacked first.
Oh, so totally well off the mark. But you instantly saw from the first 2 games that at the back, anyway, that they were much better. And the Ross Barkley signing, it's always something that raises a bit of eyebrows wherever he goes, because he's so inconsistent at times. That looks like it might actually be a fairly shrewd piece of business.
Okay. So 8:54 this morning. Just wanted to remind everybody that Owen predicted that Villa were going down. I think Phil might have predicted that Villa were going down. I think Steve-O might have predicted that Villa were going down as well.
Yeah.
Where's all your hot takes now, buddy? Where's your Messiah now, Flanders?
We all called Fulham, and I certainly called Scott Parker to be first manager sack. So I am going to hold that up as the hot take that is still simmering along nicely.
The back pages are all fairly similar this morning, so all at 6s and 7s is actually on a couple of them. So 6 for Manchester United, 7 for Liverpool. That's the goals they conceded yesterday in a remarkable day of football, as we've been talking about all morning. 6s and 7s in the Sun, back page there as well. Klopp, my boys lost the plot. Shaw, we gave up after red. They did. That's the issue. Reds at 6s and 7s is the star. So no real tab of the morning for you in that one. I thought there was one good headline in the Sun inside the paper. Am I going to be able to find it here very quickly? Man useless. I like that one. That's good, isn't it? There you go. All his flops were so bad, even the murals tried to walk away. I didn't read enough of that to see what the line was there. Slaughter, my worst day ever. That's how the Heralds had gone for that one. The strangest Sunday is the Irish Independence pull-out today with lots of pictures of the goals. And the back page is the greatest day of my life. Moy Cullen secure Galway glory with first county title. Loads of first county titles and loads of celebrations around the country from various clubs winning titles that has, I guess, obviously enough provoked some reaction from people. Under threat, sport braced for shutdown under level 5. It's the back page of the Mail, and on the brink of lockdown is the front of it. So Phil Flanagan's piece says the All-Ireland Football and Hurling Championships are in the balance before they even begin, as Irish Sport reels from the news that NEFIT is recommending the country move to level 5, the highest level of restrictions. 7261 at the back of the Times, and it's the same at 6s and 7s in the Guardian. So even the Guardian headline writers and the tabloids are the same. The RFU in England to launch probe over Sales Cup celebrations. So the Rugby Football Union will begin an investigation into the 16 coronavirus cases among Sale players after it emerged the squad went drinking into the early hours after their Premiership Cup final victory 10 days before the outbreak. Could there be a connection of everybody going to the pub and celebrating and getting hammered and then an outbreak of coronavirus? Could there be a connection? I'm not sure. I'm not an epidemiologist. So the front page of the Telegraph this morning, Solskjaer, worst day of my career. That's it, really. Kenny, positive on O'Dowda is the front page headline of the Irish Times. And Irish soccer's results versus style culture war set to flare up this week, is Brian O'Connor's column on the front of it there. Black Rock, Rocky's knockout blow. Black Rock edged Glen and epic Cork hurling decider. The pitch looked absolutely spectacular. And the celebrations and the marches and the revelry in the streets looked pretty spectacular as well. So you're going to hear a lot more about that, I think, over the next 24 hours or so. Where are we starting on?
I think that's pretty much all the back pages. We're kind of on a tight enough schedule this morning, so will we get into the pressure rankings?
Let's do it.
For me, it was a self-imposed pressure.
Was I under pressure? No.
Yeah, they're under pressure. Everyone's under pressure.
OTB AM's pressure rankings with Gillette.
And the big pressure.
All right. So, we were kind of mentioning this at the top of the show that today is going to be another, unfortunately, seismic day for the country. The impact of what's going to happen if the country goes to level 5 is going to be huge on every walk of life, and insignificantly compared to everything else will be sport, but it is significant in some way in itself. So here are the 5 most under pressure areas of the sporting world if level 5 is implemented today. At number 5 is us. We will have to bring back out the Classic Game Club.
I love Classic Game Club. It's great.
It is great, and it is just this I guess this full belly of nostalgia that we've had from 2020. Are we starting to get a little bit hungry again? We're starting to get a little bit peckish for a bit of Down versus Derry in the early 1990s, a bit of Forest versus Liverpool in the 1980s.
Maybe not. Okay. Now, Brazil played England last night on Air Sport, and I was flicking through and I was like, oh, it's good, from the 1970. And the tackling was agricultural. It looked like a Gaelic Games match. I was like, I would certainly watch a bit of this if I wasn't accidentally forgetting about the fact that Villa are currently trouncing Liverpool at the moment. Those 7 o'clock kickoffs, what's the story? Like, at some point, somebody's going to have to set an alarm that goes off in your head that goes, hang on a second, there's a big game at 7 o'clock that you've been looking forward to all day and you've accidentally forgotten about it.
it shouldn't be a game of that magnitude. It just feels wrong on a Sunday night. You should be watching Levante against Barcelona on a Sunday night.
Well, and
not
here's
Liverpool.
the thing. I mean, I'm sure they thought that that's what they were doing when they were putting up the tomato can that is Villa for Liverpool to like beat in a routine 3-0, maybe 4 if one of them decides to turn it on. A Sadio Mane hat-trick in under 10 minutes, like he's already done against Villa before. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, but you're right. I should say that the Premier League and the NFL basically are under the most pressure for us. Like, we're talking selfishly here because the NBA is about to finish up. So you've got these two major sports leagues that are set to go on for the foreseeable future. We basically need Ireland to be the only country in our general sphere of sports to go back to where they were. But Championship, that looks like under a massive amount of pressure. We'll get to the GAA in a moment, but in terms of our Irish sports over the next couple of weeks, it's not looking good whatsoever. At number 4, I've gone with Ireland's non-mainstream sports people. They're under huge pressure. These are the people who don't have crowds at all. These are the people who have done nothing wrong, and nobody can ever make a case that they've done anything wrong. These are the amateur athletes, the potential Olympians here, probably out killing themselves as we speak, putting themselves through unbelievable pain in some sort of morning gym session. And yet other sports, and possibly the GAA more than any other, definitely the GAA more than any other, has probably let them down. Like, no one is parading down streets when these guys are doing their 5 a.m. gym sessions, but parading down the streets, and the scenes we've seen yesterday and the scenes we've seen over the last couple of weeks, in fairness, from a lot of the crowds around GAA games, means that these guys will have to even fight to be able to do their gym sessions, and that is the real disappointment. And they would be at number 4 in our pressure rankings. At number 3, then, we've gone for Irish football, because we all know that the years that they've had, the financial pressure that they've been under, the mere idea of people paying for Watch League of Ireland and to actually give something to the League of Ireland as it's on its knees and as it's struggling day to day, that has been a really important part of the last couple of months. That won't be an option over the next little while. That won't, games won't happen. Like you mentioned, Dundalk's European conquest, there have to be question marks about the venues of those games now over the next little while. At number 2, then, we've got Irish rugby. Six Nations again, something that, again, when we see the news last night, that this is going to be up in the air. Pro 14 obviously goes the exact same way. How do we make this thing happen? Can this thing happen in Dublin if we're going into essentially a 4-week national lockdown?
Well, if stage 5, if they actually stick to their rules, and we know they haven't before, there's been a 2, 2.5, 2 and a bit, 2-star, 2 asterisk. Stage 5 is no sport. So just that's for clarity's sake here, that there would be nothing. We would all be back to the 5k radius of your house, and everybody working from home, only important shops open, everything closed again. That's what a full stage 5, as has been recommended, would involve. And so at that point, from a rugby perspective, and perhaps from Dundalk's perspective, Dundalk need to move to Belfast and play out of Windsor Park or somewhere, and the Irish rugby team needs to move to Belfast and play out of Ravenhill for those games, or, I don't know, move to London or move to Wales. Like, probably moving to Belfast makes the most sense.
Yeah, a Pro 14 or a Six Nations bubble in Belfast might actually be the way out of this from a rugby standpoint. At number 1 in our pressure rankings this morning is the GAA, and the GAA is trending on Twitter this morning. Not GAA, the GAA. So you could probably guess that there are a lot of questions to be asked of the organisation itself, and there is this question about whether or not you can separate the GAA hierarchy from the GAA members. And I suppose you can't really. Like, if there was crowd trouble at an international football game, that country's FA would be punished, and I guess there is going to be a lot of anger over the next little while towards the GAA, considering they have been the sporting organisation that has seen the most reckless scenes at their sports matches. Yes, there are more GAA matches taking place than any other sport. Yes, there are higher stakes and a lot of county finals and all that over the last couple of weeks, but it doesn't excuse some of the scenes that we've seen over the last little while. And it does not help that, 5-6 weeks ago at this point, they called out Neffet. And as a result of calling out Neffet, you put yourself into the spotlight that you have to be squeaky clean when you make a move like that. And in all the different factions around the country, they've been anything but.
Yeah, well, they summoned Neffet to meet them and explain their thinking behind the decision that they made to continue to allow games to be played, but not to increase the number of spectators who are at the games. And, we've seen pictures from various games where teams are celebrating on the pitch. There's pitch invasions. There's footage doing the rounds of Blackrock celebrating with a parade. And, Mark Tross was on making the point that ultimately this is down to personal responsibility. It is down to personal responsibility, and that's the point that the GAA essentially have been making from the start. It's hard, though, not to say that somebody somewhere has to take some responsibility for this at an organisational level as well. Come out and say you can't do this again and again. Because they reissued the guidelines, was it last Thursday or Friday, ahead of the weekend's county finals, urging everybody to use an abundance of caution. This is happening at the same time as what's happening in Spanish Arch and what's happening in Cork on the streets. And I don't know, you lose the moral high ground, essentially.
Yeah, and you see games taking place in other sports. You see League of Ireland games and other sports as well, where crowds have been, better organised at games. It's hard to know what exactly is the difference here, or how there can be such a disparity between what you're seeing at GAA games and what you're seeing at other games. I accept that there is a bigger volume of GAA games, and maybe some of them are doing things right, but I just don't know. Did anybody kind of second guess that parade yesterday, for example? Is there a sense that, we've won our county title, so things can wait for a moment, we can put this to one side for one weekend? Because that seems to be the attitude at the moment, that we can press pause on COVID just for a couple of hours for the game.
For us, we're going to get away with it. Like the Sale rugby team going drinking, and then all of a sudden 10 days later there's an outbreak. If there are outbreaks, when we all look back on how this came back, there will be a lot of, it was up in Dublin or it was in parts of Kildare, and it was in those counties that went into lockdown. The rest of us didn't really need to worry about it. But actually, turns out the county borders are made up, they're fictional, and viruses don't give a shit about them. So 9:06 this morning, we're going to take a break. We'll be back with Alan Quinlan talking rugby at the weekend.
OTB AM's Pressure Rankings with Gillette.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
OTB Sports, in partnership with Cadbury FC, have kicked off a brand new series of in-depth chats with some of the biggest names in football.
Gary Neville just rocks up tomorrow and says, I'll be a coach. No.
The third episode sees Gary Neville and Teddy Sheringham sit down for an in-depth chat, which will be brought to you on OTB social channels and OTB Sports Radio on Monday the 5th of October. Check out CadburyFC.com for updates on promotions and giveaways.
Into sports.
20 yards out, Ursa shoot, Johnson! Oh, what a goal for Fabinho! Wow!
Then get into the all-new OTB Sports app.
I think when he apologises to me, I probably will say hello to him, yeah. No.
Videos, sports news, live scores, interviews.
If Fabregas is going to come up to me in the street and give me some of the mouth that he would have given me on a football pitch, what do we get a slap?
Plus, exclusive content on the OTB Podcast Network. The biggest names in sports, ready when you are. Search OTB Sports on your app store and download it now.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
Yeah, you're very welcome back to OTB AM. Delighted to say Alan Quinlan is with us. Alan, how are you?
I'm good, Jared. Now, and yourself?
Munster fans like nothing better than to look to the future and say, we found somebody, we found something. A new 9 and 10, particularly 10 coming in at the last minute to win in, very up against it, comeback fashion. Not to put too much pressure on the kid, but hey, this is it has all the hallmarks of some of your former number 10s.
Yeah, I think it's very early days. Ben Healy showed great promise playing for Ireland, playing for Glenstal. He's proven that he has the resilience to take big kicks, and he did that on Saturday, which was brilliant to see, and a lot of value in that for a young kid. Even the reaction at the end with all the players jumping around him, he'll remember that for a long time. But if you were being critical and looking at his overall play, some of his passing was poor, a couple of decisions. So It wasn't as if he came on the field and just totally dominated with all his play. But I do think that he's a very, very promising player, and he just needs game time. He needs to be given the chance to make mistakes, which inevitably he will do. But those kicks will certainly create a lot of mental fortitude, if you like, if he's in that position again in big games. And it's all about confidence and self-belief for young players. If you feel you're comfortable in the environment, able to play at that level, you perform better, and that'll be massive for him. But Munster's overall performance was very, very, very sloppy.
Look, absolutely right, and at the same time, as any sports fan of any team knows, it's when new talent is coming through that hasn't yet been exposed to the full rigours of what they're going to be exposed to, but shows some glimpses of a future. That's the best part about being a sports fan, really. Is like,
yeah, of course,
it's hope.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is hope. But you look at Craig Casey, and I'm a massive fan of Craig Casey. I think he's incredible potential. But you probably look back in his game, if Munster lost that game, there probably would have been a bit of focus on his performance, that he didn't play well. Some of his decision-making wasn't great. The box kicking execution wasn't great. And you end up walking away with that perception. So sport is so fickle, Ger. And Munster win the game, so it papers over cracks of poor performance, discipline issues, execution, tactics, and incredible frustration. You know, I'm watching as a Munster man. I want him to win. I'm sure even as any neutral would watch it, would be very frustrated and kind of scratching their head as to some of the decisions they made and their game management and stuff like that. So there's a lot of concerns there. Now, I know it's a difficult place. I've been there before. You go away to Scarlets. They've all their internationals playing. Refereeing decisions going against you. You can't say the crowd influence because there's no crowd there. So it is tricky. It is definitely tricky. There's no doubt about it. And they're a good side. But, you know, if Munster lost the game, it's a very, very negative feeling, and you're starting to point the fingers at certain players, scrutinise their performances more. So a dramatic win at the end gives a great feel-good factor. But, you know, ultimately, for 75 minutes, it was very poor on Saturday. And, you know, the reaction is very good and the character and all that kind of stuff, but has to be a little bit more controlled than that. So if they go into the dressing room losing that game, it's a very, very quiet dressing room. So it's a massive contrast. But, you know, Craig Casey will learn from that a little bit, and just being a little bit slow, waiting at the back of breakdowns. Teams counter-rucking, knocking him backwards at times, unsettling him. He's just got to, you know, learn from that stuff. It's a big step up, but he's fantastic potential. Gavin Coombs coming off was brilliant. So they're the guys that'll give a little bit of inspiration and hope that there's change. You know, there's some young guys coming through. Fineen Wycherley. There's a couple of more young guys. Jack O'Sullivan, John Hodnett, Thomas Ahern. There's a lot of good young kids there coming through that they will get game time, but. It's crazy. We saw with the Premier League yesterday, sport can be just crazy at times, and dramatic scenes at the end, Munster running off the field, and you can learn so much from that as well. And you know, it can bring people together. Like I say, build self-confidence, but certainly some issues there as well.
Does the team look like it has a defined overarching style and a pattern?
Not at the moment. To me, I think the pattern at the moment is pretty obvious to see. I think there's potential there. You cut your cloth according to your measure. You know, probably back when I played in probably the 06 team, we were very direct. We had a brilliant pack of forwards. We played to our strengths. We kicked a fair bit with Rog. Trevor Halstead was, you know, a powerhouse carrying the ball at 12. Sean Payne at fullback, rock solid. You know, it was a simplistic enough game plan, but it was effective. And nobody really cares about game plans if you're winning and beating up the opposition and scoring tries, whether it be through mauls or one-out runners or whatever. But the problem Munster have is they're kind of caught between the kicking game and then trying to move it, and they just look like they need a little bit of... And you could say it'll take time, and Stephen Larkham is probably the one who needs to, you know, take ownership of a little bit of expansion there and a bit evolving their game plan a little bit. And at the end of the day, and I've said this many times, people focus on the kicks, the box kicks, but everybody is doing that now to get out of their own half. The one on Saturday where Craig Casey's on the edge of the 22, he's a quick ruck and he box kicks into the corner and Steph Evans catches it clean, thumbs the ball down the field from the mark, and Munster are back in their own 22 a couple of minutes later. You know, so that's the stuff that they need to be so much better off. If you're going to kick it in the opposition half, you've got to try and get it back or force a turnover from them. But I think we're going to see a bit of. I think we're going to see them trying to be a bit more expansive and vary their game a little bit more, because, you know, you go back to the first Leinster game after the rugby resumed, and they got some great tries and moved the ball very well, and they can't just wait for reactions in games to move the ball. You've Chris Farrell, Damien Dialinde. They're both probably nearly 110 kilos. Dialinde is world class. Chris Farrell for me is international class, and they're not getting the ball in the first half. I know the conditions are difficult, so but some of the decision making and the errors and the knock-ons and just turning the ball over was very, very poor. And, you know, as I said, the win at the end, there's high drama there, and they did score 3 tries in fairness, so they can take positives out of it, but there's still concerns about the way they're playing.
Alan, if you're looking at the league from an overall perspective, are you saying roll on to Pro 16 at this point?
Yeah, I think there was a certain amount of excitement when the Kings and the Cheetahs came in on to you know, bring something new, and I'm all for that. Enhance the product, have something different, have the excitement of traveling to South Africa and these kind of mini tours for the Irish provinces, and being in a different environment. But I think the Kings it was always going to be very difficult for them. Financial issues, lack of quality. The Cheetahs were kind of battling on both fronts, Currie Cup, Super Rugby, and then trying to assemble a team to come in first. So they started very, very poorly. They've shown, and probably last season, that they can be really hard to beat over there and very competitive here. I think what you'll get with the Super Rugby teams, if you like, the Sharks, the Bulls, the Stormers and the Lions, is you'll get their internationals playing. You'll get a step up, another step up in quality. You know, I think if an Irish province goes down and plays the Sharks or the Stormers in Cape Town, for example, and you're missing your internationals and they have theirs, you know, it'll be very, very difficult, because they've a lot of quality players in their Super Rugby teams. But look, it's the international kind of availability of players in the Pro 12 as it is now, Pro 14 as it was, and Pro 16 as it could be, is always going to be a contentious issue, and when they play, and it's difficult to manage that. But I think it'll be a good thing that the South African teams come in.
Do you have confidence that, like, I mean, the rising tide will lift the boats of Munster, Ulster and Connacht in particular?
Yeah, well, if it makes it more competitive, I think that's probably one of the issues is, you know, the competitiveness of some of the games. You know, I was involved in matches where the internationals are away, and there was a real competitive edge to going over to Edinburgh on a Friday night on international weekends, where, you know, they're missing a lot of their Scottish internationals as well, and we've a point to prove, because Europe is coming up in a couple of weeks, and the guys who are picked want to be on the starting team and are frustrated they're not getting opportunities, and we had a fair bit of depth in the squad, and, you know, you go and play those games, and I just think some of them now are not as competitive, and they're predictable, and they're just not something that's grabbing the attention of people. And it's a very difficult situation for Pro 14 here, because they're trying to run a product that's starved of their stars at times, you know. And so it's not their fault. I think it's down to the scheduling. And I said this last year, that maybe it's better to reduce the games down a little bit more, and just, rather than playing home and away situations in the pools, maybe reduce down the number of games, I don't know, to try and have more availability, run it off over a 3 or 4 month period or something like that. So, you know, everyone has an opinion on it, but I think if you have more competitiveness there and the South African teams are coming in, but there's no point in the South African teams coming in and their second string teams being sent up here to play for 2 weekends and the Irish provinces walloping them. We're not going to get out of that for the league, you know, and the Irish provinces have done well. They can mix and match. The Welsh provinces, bar the Scarlets, have struggled a little bit. You know, Cardiff are a good bit stronger this year. Ospreys thankfully had a good win at the weekend, which hopefully will be the start of their resurgence again, you know, because having more quality and more quality teams, even when the internationals are away, it makes for better excitement and a bit of more competitiveness. And I think we've lost a bit of that in the last couple of years.
That whole thing about them potentially sending second string teams and maybe at some point the Irish provinces will send second string teams and the thing becomes imbalanced. Like, there was some talk that a deal will have to be done about a European competition. All of this seems like we're kind of trying to fix some issues while not addressing the major issue, which is the international calendar and the future of the 6/potentially 7 nations. Like, it feels like we're kind of missing the opportunity here to fix rugby when rugby is teetering on the brink with so many of the English clubs potentially going bust, and who knows what's the story in France. It's kind of covered up a little bit because there's a few rich owners.
Yeah, well, the English and the French dominate, and they're the main power brokers of the Northern Hemisphere rugby. I think the RFU would conform to, obviously not changes that would severely impact them, but by and large, I think they would be open to it. The English clubs, because their league is very intense, again, the quality can be very good. It can be average at times. Even with the internationals playing, can be a bit imbalanced. But there is an intensity there, and you have to acknowledge that does benefit the English players more when it comes to playing bigger games. The French league, again, controlled by different owners, the clubs, and not everyone working in unison there. But I think, as you say, Ger, and this will certainly focus the minds on both the English and the French. You've so many people pulling and dragging in different areas, player welfare, calendars, money, scheduling, an alignment with the Southern Hemisphere, a global calendar, all that kind of stuff. So you would imagine that, you know, things need to change. I think they do, and to try and improve the quality of rugby right across the world. The TV networks trying to buy it, CVC coming in, all that kind of stuff, and making it a bigger brand. But I think a global season ultimately will happen, and an international league will happen. And I think COVID has probably enhanced that more. And I think, but you've so many people and so many hoops to drum through because there's so many stakeholders who some will agree, some won't, and that's the challenge with this. It's not like FIFA and football that just make decisions that govern the game globally, in a sense. I know they all have their own individual leagues, but there's a lot of hoops to jump through in rugby, and I think a global an international league would certainly be probably the start, and then to figure out, like I said about the Pro 14, can we make it better by shortening it or putting it in a block of matches where you do have internationals there? The players can't play, particularly in Ireland. The English guys play over 30 games. Here in Ireland, it's probably no more than 20, 25 for the internationals. So there's a lot of variables there, but I think it is time to maybe change up the focus and the formats of some of these competitions a little bit.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely come back to that as well. But great that there's something at least for us to talk about from a positive perspective with these young players too. Alan, good stuff. Thanks a million this morning. Cheers.
Cheers, lads. Thanks.
It's Alan Quinlan giving us his thoughts there. 23 minutes past 9. If you want to get in touch with us, you can use the hashtag OTBAM, or our WhatsApp number is 087 918 180. Plenty of Ireland talk across the week. Of course, Ireland against Slovakia on Thursday night. Here's Stephen Kenny talking to the media yesterday in the aftermath of all the league games at the weekend and how his players were getting on. Have a look.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, it's a tough game. You've got to go away to Slovakia. They've obviously good home form and very consistent team and experienced team. But the other side of it is it's a tremendous opportunity for us, and we know the opportunity that does exist, and the possibility of the European Championships in Ireland is unique, really. It's never happened before, may never happen again, we don't know. So it's so I think that's like that kind of motivation to sort of lift the country. Like it would be an incredible experience for the whole country. So we're a long way away from that, because we've got a tough game in Slovakia, and that's only a semi-final. So we're a long way away from that, and I think we've got to do something extraordinary and win away from home again, and we'll be planning with everything we have to try and achieve that.
It's Stephen Kenny there. We'll hear more from that press conference and the rest of the week's stories on otbsports.com or on the OTB Sports app. It's 25 minutes past 9 this morning. Flo Lloyd-Hughes is with us. She's a football broadcaster and journalist, and we're talking about the WSL. Flo, how are you getting on?
Hi guys, thanks for having me.
So we're 3 matches in to the start of the season, and we just wanted to kind of see exactly how things were going. This was the most hyped competition that we've seen. It's coming off the back of an intense period of focus over the last 18 months on the league, and a huge investment in terms of money and resources, and an influx of some of the best players in the world. So have the actual matches themselves lived up to the level of expectation that people would have had about them?
Yeah, definitely. I think when you look at a team like Arsenal, and for Irish interest, you've got Katie McCabe there, who's a big national team player. They've hit the ground running. They've had some big, entertaining matches, fantastic goals, not just in the league, but also the FA Cup. Yesterday, for Man United, we saw our first glimpses of Kristen Press and Tobin Heath, who have joined from the US, big players in the US women's national team. We saw our first glimpses of them, and they look like they want to impress, and they're going to be really entertaining in this league. We're yet to see Alex Morgan, which perhaps is the only disappointment so far. She's coming back off being out of action for a fair amount of time due to having a baby, and she's still getting up to match fitness. So perhaps that's the only disappointment, is we're yet to see a glimpse of her and why she's such a big player.
Do we know how long she is away from playing, Flo?
Well, a lot of people were hoping that yesterday she was going to be making her first start, but she didn't even travel with the team to Manchester. And I think part of that is also having a young child, and she has to, I think, make decisions based on where she's travelling. She's only in the country with her mother-in-law, which I think is quite a funny one, to move to a new country and just bring your mother-in-law with you. I can imagine it's a bit of an interesting household there, but I think she's making some decisions based on that. And if she's only going to be a substitute, I don't think she's going to travel for those long away games. So by the looks of things, perhaps next weekend might be a first substitute appearance. It seems like she is some way off starting still, and she's still trying to get to match fitness, but Spurs could do with the support. So I think as soon as they can, they'll want to get her on the pitch.
How are they positioned in terms of actually making a title challenge, and how much will her addition be rocket fuel to that challenge?
So for Spurs, they're some way off challenging for the title. They are very much the sort of newcomers in the top division. It's a bit of a building process, I think, for them. They have only been in the WSL now. This is only their second season after being promoted to the Championship. They have the same coaches that they've had for a very long time, and they're not really splashing the cash like some of the other teams who have a big Premier League men's team as a parent club. They're trying to be a bit more stable. They've got a nice group of young players, but this season they've added a bit more of experience in big names. They brought in Alana Kennedy from Australia, who's got tons of international experience, and now they've brought Alex Morgan. So this is a bit of a building year for them. It hasn't been a great start to the season, to be honest. They got beaten 4-1 by City yesterday. They've got 1 point on the board, and they have struggled to score goals, and it was the same last season. So that's what they'll be hoping for from Alex Morgan, is to just start scoring goals. Yesterday, they scored their first goal that was scored by a player on their team. Before that, they'd only had an own goal to their name. So it's really important that they start scoring goals, and then they can look at trying to push up, because it hasn't been a great start to the season for them.
It's very unusual that we can actually speak about an individual possibly being bigger than a club. Like I saw the figures doing around that Alex Morgan has more Instagram followers than Tottenham Hotspur in general. Like that comes with a whole heap of pressure. But the question I would have is, do you think that there's going to be future investment to ensure that she has the parts around her to challenge next season or the season after?
Well, it's an interesting one, because how long she's going to be here is still unclear. There's some reports that she's only going to be here until the end of the year, and then there's other reports that she's going to be here till the end of the season. From my understanding, it's a bit of both. Apparently, she can decide if she wants to stay until the end of the season. It's only a loan from her parent club in Orlando. So her manager in Orlando is saying that she's going to come back in January, but apparently her managers and Spurs seem to think that she's going to be here for the whole season. So I think it's sort of up to her, depending how things go. So in that sense, I think expecting her to transform a football club is a lot of pressure, because she's only here on a temporary basis. And in that sense, yes, it's a massive move, but it's going to take a bit of time for her to get up to match fitness. And if she does stay only till the end of the year, then how much impact can she really have in a short space of time? But if she stays till the end of the season and she can start playing soon, then she could have a real impact on this league and hopefully impact on the club as well. And it will kickstart some future investment. But a lot of this for the US players is about the Olympic Games. It's about making the team for the Olympic Games. So beyond that, I'm not sure if she'll want to come back again after this season. I guess it depends how she does and if she enjoys being in London as well.
What about the Americans who are at City? Are they in it for a slightly longer haul, or is everybody fairly much in the same boat where this is a very specific get match fitness, stay as fit as you can, get to as high a level as you possibly can, and then completely reassess everything after the Olympics?
It's a bit of that, really. I think for some players, they will decide whether or not they'll go back to the States after the season. I think hopefully we will see people like Sam Mewis, who signed for City, and maybe Rose Lavelle stay a little bit longer. But for most of them, it was a case of, if I'm going to make the Olympic squad, I need to be playing top quality football. And if I'm going to be fit as well to perform at the Olympics, I need to be playing good football. And that was a big motivator because of the situation in the States with COVID, and also what they've had now with the States is they're playing sort of glorified friendlies, and the quality isn't as good because lots of top players are deciding not to play because of the COVID situation. So this was a kind of great scenario for everyone, really, to be able to get the best players over in the WSL. They get to play, the clubs get them for a bit. But because of the way the contract system works in the States, where you're sort of owned by the federation, it's quite difficult then to work out long-term opportunities, because you get traded. Like we see in a lot of US sports, you're constantly traded between teams, so they sort of have your rights, as it were. So it's hard to know beyond this season what the landscape will look like, but it'd be fantastic if they will stay after the Olympics and come back, and hopefully we will see some of them make that call.
And is there still a consensus that the best club football is played in America? All things being equal, say after the Olympic Games, fingers crossed we have a vaccine, would the assumption be that the best quality football on a week-to-week basis is still in America, or is this the window of opportunity for the league in England to establish itself as the league that has the best players in the world in it?
I think this is definitely a window of opportunity. I think up until this point, America had been leading the way because a lot of the best players in the world had been based there, and you know, that's really the US team in itself. But I think, you know, Sam Kerr had played majority of her football in the US and Australia, and now she's decided to move here full time for now anyway. And I think that is a big commitment to make and a big statement to make. Pernilla Harder as well, moving over, one of the best players in the world. So I think there's a real window of opportunity, and after this season it'll be interesting to see what happens and how the WSL does measure up against the NWSL, because this season has been a bit of a write-off for them. They had a one-off tournament, but now they've got these weird regional friendly situations. So this is a huge opportunity for the WSL to put itself on the map. And also most people in the world can watch the league for free as well. So it's a huge opportunity to get eyes on it and to create some fans as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about the terrestrial TV, and all of a sudden those terrestrial TV broadcasters are going to have loads of airtime to fill because they can no longer afford the rights for other sports that they traditionally would have covered 3 or 4 decades ago. So I definitely feel like there's a wave to be surfed here. You mentioned Katie McCabe in Arsenal. I think she's been pressed into slightly emergency service at fullback because of injuries, even though she obviously would have played a lot of fullback in the past. I'm not sure what that means for her future, but Arsenal are going well. Do they have the strength and depth at the moment to compete and to win the title this year?
I think depth is an issue for Arsenal, and it's something that their manager Joe Montero hates being asked about, but is a reality of the situation. They've got such a fantastic core group who've played together for a very long time, who know each other very well, who also play on national sides together and have played together for years. That's a massive plus point, but at the same time, when they do suffer injuries or they have fatigue in the squad, things can unravel quite quickly. And we saw that a couple of years ago when they had so many injuries. It was so hard for them to play catch up. And in a small league like the WSL, if you lose one game against the title challengers like City and Chelsea, you put yourself so far back that, those can be title deciders quite early on in the season. So it's so important that they maintain this momentum and be able to bring it for those big games rather than potentially give it all to beat a team 9-0 and then perhaps you're exhausted or you get some injuries for that game and then you can't compete in the games that really matter. So that's the risk for Arsenal. But in the moment, yesterday they went a goal down and then they brought it back in the end to win 3-1. So that fight and that determination will stand them in good stead when the fixture list gets tougher.
Flo, good stuff. Thanks a million. Flo, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning.
Thank you, guys.
That's Flo talking to us. Flo Lloyd-Hughes talking to us about the WSL football at the weekend. 0879 180 180 is the number here if you want to get in touch with us by WhatsApp, or you can use the hashtag OTB AM. Now, obviously overnight it looks like we're heading towards a very important day when it comes to the future of the country. Essentially, we're talking about moving the entire country potentially to the most severe level, which is level 5 of lockdown. At level 5 of lockdown, all sports would be cancelled. One of the issues that's come up in recent weeks in particular has been fans' responsibility at matches. A really interesting tweet from the Dundalk goalkeeper Gary Rogers yesterday, just pointing out the difference between some of the GA fans and some of the SSE Electricity fans. We can stick that tweet up now, and I'm delighted to say Gary Rogers is with us this morning. Gary, good morning to you. How are you doing?
Morning. How are you?
Yeah, so it's GA social distance versus SSE Electricity League social distance. We should establish for everybody who's listening that you're centrally involved in GA and have been a GA goalkeeping coach, and I guess you played all sports as a kid, right?
Yeah, I would have certainly played with plenty of GA, and I played with the Meath senior team as well in the league in 2007. So it's certainly been a big part of my life as well. But it was an interesting viewpoint where you see the two differences in the crowds, and there's lots of evidence floating around there today, and I've been tagged in lots of pictures since of different grounds all over the country.
Was it just frustration on your part that actually... Tell us, why did you put it up? That's a better question.
I kind of put it up because I just seen the difference. Like, the FAI come in for a lot of flack, and deservedly so in some cases, but I think in this instance, the FAI have put in protocols and and followed the government guidelines and passed these on to the clubs, and the clubs have put them in place. So I feel that they deserve credit for doing the right thing and adhering to the guidelines. And in fairness, it's professional sport as opposed to club GA matches, which is an amateur organisation, as we all know. But I was just highlighting the fact that the FAI and the clubs have been doing their business right and deserve credit for that.
Is it just that we can't have nice things? Is that our problem in Ireland? That we just can't? We hate following rules so much that when somebody says you can sit here and here, we choose to sit in between?
Look, you look back to, say, lockdown when there was no sport, and you think, everyone was missing sport, and there was, no matter who you spoke to, they were missing some sort of sport or something, and they're like, and then when you get it back, I suppose, and there's rules and regulations put in place, I think the very least you can do is adhere to them, and be grateful for the fact that you're back, going to games, playing the games, and doing what you enjoy. So, I don't think the guidelines were that difficult to follow. If we go into a lockdown, it's going to be a sad state of affairs for everybody.
Yeah, and certainly a couple of weeks ago there was a sense that, oh look, this is a very localised thing. It's in Dublin, it's in Kildare, it's in Laois, it's in Offaly, and they've locked down those counties, and that problem is gone. But that wasn't the case at all. And for whatever reason, people just decided that somehow the rules don't seem to apply to us.
Yeah, well, look, it's rampant. It's everywhere. There's it's transpiring all over the country. And it's not just all down to football and soccer. It's it's general ways of life and parties and all the rest that's going on. But the picture I put up was just highlighting the social distance in football and in soccer, and the way our supporters in the League of Ireland are behaving, and the way the clubs are behaving. And I know even from the club in Dundalk, when we have games, we use the YDC for the home team, and the opposition team have the access to two dressing rooms in the main stand, and all the stands are social distance, and there's specific seating for everyone. So look, we're doing the best, or the club are doing the best, and the FAI are doing the best to make sure the club are following the guidelines. So it'll be very disappointing for clubs to be shut down and they're adhering to the guidelines.
Gary, are you worried about what might come next? Because I think that the first lockdown has been negotiated. I think there's a general sense that the second one, going back into it again, can often be a tougher thing to do. Are you worried about kind of your teammates, about football in general in Ireland over the next little while?
Yeah, it's hard to see. I suppose a lockdown not happening at the minute. The way the talk was yesterday, there's certainly tighter restrictions on the way, and I think we'll all feel the effect, whether GAA is closed down or soccer is closed down. We don't know just yet, but I'm sure it's worrying times. There's no doubt about that.
If we go to level 5, that would mean an end to all sport for what they're saying is a 4-week period, and that would obviously be a couple of big games for you guys. Yeah, I think big games for us, but also you look at the other league teams that are trying to win a league and first division and stuff like that. It's going to affect everybody. If you call off the league, there's a lot at stake for everyone. It's people's livelihoods and their jobs as much as anything else. So okay, we've got big games to look forward to, but it's people's livelihoods that we're messing with, and that's why I'm kind of glad that the clubs and the FAI have put in place the proper guidelines and adhered to them. So at least they can say, well, look, we played our part and we've done everything right, or tried to anyway.
I wonder, is it a case, Gary, where if we're lucky enough to have sport in a few weeks' time, that we just need to do a full reversal on crowds, or is that unfair to all the non-GAA crowds who've been showing up and safety distancing?
Well, in fairness, we played in the Aviva Stadium last week and there was no crowd, and it was, for our players and for our supporters, it was the biggest game as you're going to have in your lifetime. And look, there was no supporters there, so we were just grateful to be playing games and enjoyed it. We obviously enjoyed, the win and the occasion, but it would be great to have fans there. And there's no doubt that sport needs fans, and I'm obviously not advocating sport without fans, but in the current climate, I think it is what it is, and you have to kind of go with them guidelines. And look, unfortunately, we would love to have 20,000 people in the Aviva Stadium to celebrate, qualifying for the group stages, but it wasn't to be. We didn't even have family members there, so it's just a sign of the times.
Yeah, but that's a sacrifice that you've got to make, despite the fact that it is, as you said, the biggest game of some people's lives, and it's a sacrifice worth making at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gary, great to have you with us. Thanks a million for joining us this morning.
No problem at all.
It's Gary Rogers there from obviously Dundalk, and as he said, a former Intercounty Meath Gaelic footballer, has been involved in the goalkeeping coaching side of Intercounty football, and did put that tweet up, GA social distance versus SSE electricity social distance, and it's a picture from the Meath County final yesterday. Obviously people sitting beside each other, You know, we were making those jokes early in the year about the big families of 5 or 6 lads all aged the same going out, and it turns out I don't know how to get to the bottom of this or how to stop all this or what to do, like, ultimately.
It's going to have to be crowds removed from games, isn't it? Like, if this grows legs as one of the reasons why level 5 has had to be brought into play, then you can't really come back out of it and say, yeah, let's keep on this pathway of reintroducing fans into stadiums. They're probably going to have to pull the pin on anybody's hopes of seeing live sport before the end of the year. Like, that's the only way to kind of deal with it, isn't it? And like, even if there's kind of a coming back of the phases and people come back to phase 3 or phase 2 of this, then there might be tweaks to it and say, well, you can have level 2 or level 3, but without the whole 200 spectators thing.
Yeah, and look, it's probably less the spectators than the parties afterwards that people are having to celebrate this stuff, and the pitch invasions and all that kind of stuff that ultimately are the look that makes everybody else go, well, if they're allowed to do that, then I can have my gathering in the back. And, you know, if you can have golf gates, if you can all go and meet your mates for dinner and golf, then why can't I do my thing? And, you know, and I think, again, a lot of this does go back to the mood music around calling out Neffet. You know, that was a significant moment in all this.
And also, like, I mean, the situation with Blackrock yesterday, that still happens if there's no fans at games. The only way to prevent that is a game not happening whatsoever. Like, is that the most extreme level that they're going to take this?
Well, that's level 5.
Like, no, I know that, but I mean beyond the 4 weeks of level 5. Like, are they saying that as soon as level 5 is over, sport resumes, and even if it's on behind closed doors, people are still going to go crazy because there is going to be a winner?
Or you just make sure that everybody understands that it's not worth it. Like, it really isn't worth it. That little party and that little thing, if that leads to people dying, then that's not really worth it, is it? Is it worth it? It doesn't seem like it's worth it.
Do you know what? And like, maybe hammering home that message isn't effective enough. Maybe actually hammering home the message that if you celebrate in a certain manner or congregate in a certain manner, you won't actually have sport at all. I know it's a terrible thing to say, but it might actually be something that this would be something that relates to a lot of people more than the idea that people are dying. That is this, that clearly is a message that's been out there from the start, but obviously isn't working.
Anybody wants to get in touch this morning, 0879 180 180, and it is, 9:46, time for Deal or No Deal.
I signed for them after the Euros, and after my first day's training on driving home, I was actually thinking, regretting it, what have I done? Like, I walked into a circus. It's amazing, isn't it?
Phil. Who's getting relegated this season, Phil?
I went
Who's
West.
the first manager sacked?
I went West Brom. I went Fulham, and I went Sheffield United.
Did you not give a big shout out to Villa in the middle of that? Did you not say Villa were going to have first manager sacked?
No.
Did you not?
Definitely not. No, I said Villa would be all right.
Who was it?
Definitely wasn't me.
Stephen Doyle, I think.
Was
It's on the lads. It's all there on the website on OTB Sports. Yeah. No, I hadn't got Villa anywhere near relegation when I saw that Grealish was staying, Watkins had signed, Emi Martinez, Matty Cash, obviously Bertrand Traore has come in as well, and now Ross Barkley. I mean, Villa are looking up, not down.
They are looking up. You did say last week, I would say, that Villa don't have the players to create the chances that Leeds created. Is that a direct quote?
Did I say that?
I think you did.
Really? I was in here on Friday and I was talking about games that are must watch, and Liverpool Villa was one of the must watch games.
Friday. Definitely before that. It was...
And Owen had said, until Liverpool absolutely destroyed Villa. And I said, no, this is a really tough game. And my God, did it prove to be very tough.
It was glorious. It was absolutely glorious.
Yeah. It made up for what happened last season.
Is it the weirdest result in Premier League history?
No, I don't know. See, in the space of 7 days, City have conceded 5, Guardiola's heaviest defeat. United have conceded 6 and Liverpool have conceded 7. So
Leicester got hammered by West Ham.
West Ham, David Moyes working from home. Unbelievable. Like, they're not going to let him. They're like, Dave, you just stay at home, we'll send whatever you need out there, and you can maybe think about coming back in next year. You did say that Liverpool need a better sub-goalkeeper. I've been banging this drum for ages because Adrian, look, the hard thing about it is it's hard enough to get a decent keeper. Liverpool have got more than a decent keeper in Alisson. Now, that took a lot of pain on the defeat in Kiev. Liverpool lost Champions League final as their goalkeeper had an absolute meltdown. So they signed a keeper off the back of that. But Alisson got an injury at the start of last season. There was rumours that he was going to miss the Arsenal game last week. Didn't. We saw how crucial he was with that save from Lacazette. And then when the news emerged yesterday that he was out, and then I saw Klopp's quotes before the game, said it was a shoulder injury. There was a few Liverpool fans, and I texted them saying, this isn't good, because when Adrian plays, you can just see the difference. And I don't know what Andy Robertson was doing 4 minutes in, pinging a ball at him.
Giving him an early touch, I believe it's called. Get him, let him get his feet under him, get a bit of confidence in him.
Okay, fine. Play it along the ground then. Don't ping it at him. And then he gives it away. Joe Gomez doesn't exactly cover himself in glory with his attempt to try and stop Ollie Watkins, but at stages during the game, you could see Liverpool players do not want to pass the ball back to Adrian. So that's what Liverpool are going to have to do for the next few weeks, basically.
I do think, though, that there is like a significant pattern emerging where if you punt the ball from anywhere in the right midfield quadrant over to the left corner and have somebody who's fast running onto it, then Liverpool are in trouble. We've seen it enough now. Like, Villa should have scored 12 goals last night.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, if you're Joe Gomez or Virgil van Dijk and that ball's been punted, you're a little bit more wary of it because of who's behind you.
I know, but you can also just drop back a few feet.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, Jurgen Klopp spoke about how he's going to have very little time to work with his players before the Merseyside derby, but he'll have plenty of time to analyse what went wrong and what they need to change. And, you know, if...
Can they sign a goalkeeper today?
They can, but I don't think they will. So that would suggest they're going to stick with Adrian, because I don't think they're going to call on Queevy and Kelleher to say, right, now is your time to shine.
Could he be any worse than that?
Well, I just think if you're Adrian, your confidence must be absolutely shot to bits. And then he came out after the game and he tweeted, and it seemed to be the message from a lot of the Liverpool players was tough one to take, that the team comes back stronger. And do you know what? It could turn out to be a pivotal result, and maybe Klopp just tweaks a few things, but Alisson is part of the reason that they can play with the high line and they can basically take a gamble on players getting caught offside, but if they do by chance get in behind, that Alisson will be there to sweep it up. Adrian is not Alisson, we know that, but it's going to be some nervy few weeks for Liverpool fans watching games if Adrian's in goal, especially that Merseyside derby. I mean, Pickford didn't cover himself in glory on Saturday against Brighton, but you know, he's looking like a much better option than Adrian at the moment.
Phil, just on Gerard's point there about the ability of teams to ping one over the top towards the left of that Liverpool defence. Like, you look at that Leeds goal, that Jack Harrison goal, which kind of summed up that first weekend performance. Like, I was kind of watching it back again last night because it was up for goal of the month on Match of the Day, and I was fully sure that it was Trent Alexander-Arnold who was totally at fault for that Jack Harrison goal, but actually Joe Gomez's tracking in that instance could probably be a lot better. He was obviously the scapegoat last night because he was the worst defender on the pitch. Like, I'm not saying for 1 second that he's in, that they need to sign a centre back to replace Joe Gomez whatsoever, but does there need to be a better backup there? Does there need to just be a situation where they can call on somebody else if someone like Gomez has a disaster?
Just play Fabinho. They kept one clean sheet this season in the league, Liverpool, and that was when Fabinho played centre half against Chelsea. And
so would you be up for moving Fabinho to centre back beside Virgil van Dijk with everybody fit and firing?
For the moment, yeah, until Matip comes back in, and that's at half time. I was thinking, get somebody on in midfield and drop Fabinho back, because Joe Gomez just wasn't at it. And one thing you get with Fabinho ahead of Joe Gomez is Fabinho is firmer in the tackle. He'll put in a tackle. I mentioned the Watkins, the first goal. He just waltzed inside. I know it's very tricky when you're defending and you're retreating and you're afraid to touch opposing players in the box in case you give away a penalty, but he wasn't quick enough there. Whereas I think back to the Chelsea game, Timo Werner had a run at Fabinho early on, and Fabinho, the next time Werner had a go at him, he won the tackle, and it was a really composed display from Fabinho, and actually allayed any fears Liverpool fans would have had of not having another centre half. Obviously Lovren had gone, whatever fans thought of Lovren, but to actually have another body there. But yeah, I'd have no problem with Fabinho there. I mean, it'd be interesting to see what Gareth Southgate does. He's hardly going to go with a central defence of Harry Maguire and Joe Gomez, because there's two players that had absolute shockers yesterday.
I want to see that.
Well, Tyrone Mings, was I thought he was going to score one of the goals of the season yesterday when he took off, but yeah, no, not a good day for Joe Gomez. And he had looked good against Arsenal, but at times I think maybe he just finds the game so easy at times that he just relaxes a bit too much. But yeah, plenty to worry about. I wonder, would it be even worth putting Van Dijk in at the right-hand side of that central defence just to maybe shore things up on Trent Alexander-Arnold's side?
All of a sudden, there's a little bit of doubt there from a Liverpool team who are like super stratospheric success, crushing all comers.
Yeah, but look, I've said this all along, that this season is not going to be mid-90s. This is going to be, you could end up losing 5 or 6 games and still winning the league, because I mean, look at some of the results so far. You mentioned West Ham. West Ham, in the space of a week, have won 4-0 and 3-0 against Wolves and Leicester.
Yeah.
And people were looking at West Ham's fixture saying, yeah, David Moyes isn't going to be around for much longer. And then they've done that. So
it's been 3 draws so far this season.
Change of formation, but obviously took Mark Noble out of the team as well. And I think Bowen's been a really good signing since they got him from Hull in January. But yeah, I think there's going to be some crazy results. Like, there hasn't been a 0-0 yet. So I know, obviously, things are not looking great in terms of what's going to happen around Ireland maybe the next few weeks. But if the Premier League obviously comes back in a couple of weeks after the international break and we get served up some of this as sports fans, at least it's something to enjoy.
Yeah, a lot of goals. From Manchester United's perspective, we were speaking earlier on with Andy Mitten. He expects there to be a fair bit of business today. Let's assume Cavani is done. Let's assume Telles is done. What else can they do today? This is our last official deal or no deal of the transfer window. What can they do?
They need a centre-half. I mean, one thing we saw yesterday was you can't blame Victor Lindelof for this because he wasn't playing. And I've been watching their games all this season thinking, how does Lindelof get all the criticism when Harry Maguire is just as bad, if not worse than him at the moment? I know Harry Maguire had a few issues off the field before the season started, but that goal that they conceded after going 1-0 up was comical stuff. Like, he wrestled Luke Shaw out of the way, and yeah, they just look so bad at the moment. Luke Shaw lucky not to get sent off, so you'd imagine that Telles comes in and he takes over there. Central midfield, I feel sorry for Van de Beek. He doesn't know what he's got himself into at the moment, but surely he has to be getting a run in the team. And Pogba was dreadful yesterday. Matic, obviously, we've talked about him before, just doesn't have the legs. And Fred actually looked a lot better. At least he can get around the pitch when he came on. So I really expected after the Brighton win that maybe it might kick things on, the back-to-back wins over Brighton, because United have this habit of being a bit streaky where when they go on a run, the confidence is up. And, you know, when they go 1-0 up with the penalty, you think, yeah, maybe they can kick on. But you said Villa could have scored 12. Spurs could have done the same yesterday. It was frightening. By the way, how good was Harry Kane in his withdrawn role, where at one stage he came and got the ball in the first half, turned Harry Maguire, and then pinged the ball along the ground like a little 8-iron on the edge of the green. Very little air in it, but it was unbelievable. But going back to United, yeah, it's the same thing. It's just rinse and repeat since Fergie left. That here they are, deadline closes at 11 o'clock tonight. They're scrambling. They're scrambling like Irish people used to scramble to an off licence on the Thursday before a Good Friday.
That's a great analogy. Is Jose Mourinho back?
He's got quite a good squad. You're looking at...
Doesn't he?
If they can get Skriniar, which the talk is that they'll get Skriniar from Inter Milan, then he definitely is an upgrade on Eric Dyer. And yeah, they were clinical yesterday. But look, I think there's going to be days where Spurs will look very abject, so I wouldn't be getting too carried away.
How is the team going to look that abject when they've got Son and Harry Kane? Like, that's brilliant. And then if Gareth Bale is 70% of Gareth Bale,
it depends. What's going to happen is if teams invite Spurs onto them, then it suited Spurs so much to get that equaliser so soon and then just hit United on the break, and they just had so much space. United are at their best when they play teams on the break, but obviously they go chasing. So then Spurs just picked them off, and it was a clinical display. But I just think, as I said earlier, this season, my feeling before the season started was this is going to be the hardest one to call in terms of what happens, and I stand by that, because whether it's to do, I know you were talking to David Meyler about the lack of crowds, and sometimes the games can have a training ground feel, but some of the results we've seen so far have been absolutely crazy, and I just don't think it's going to stop there.
Is your hunch, Phil, just on Spurs, that Matt Doherty's going to get his place back automatically here? Because like the last thing he would have needed is a Serge Aurier goal yesterday.
Serge Aurier played very well, didn't he? I mean, even the goal that he scored, he had a few chances, he got forward, and yeah, you wondered, was it just the fact that Doherty had played a few games, and you know, he certainly didn't look match fit when he played for Ireland last month. In a way, we were kind of thankful that he didn't play, given what happened to Seamus Coleman on Saturday. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens after the international break. Now, the thing is, Aurier will have his moments where Mourinho will just say, nah, I need to take you back out of the team, because that rush of blood to the head where you give away a penalty or you do something silly. But this is what Mourinho wants anyway. He just wants competition. He has now competition for both fullbacks.
Yeah. Last question, is Ole Gunnar Solskjaer the Manchester United manager at the end of October?
Yeah, I think he will be, yeah, absolutely. It's because the Champions League, he got them into the Champions League, so he'll start the Champions League campaign, and they've got a really tough group, but I think if things start going wrong in the European competition, then it becomes a bigger issue. But
good chance it will. RB Leipzig and Paris Saint-Germain. Phil, busy day today?
Yeah, looks like, so a few deals already done. Obviously, Ben Godfrey has gone to Everton. Everton are, I mean, they must be rubbing their hands at the thoughts of facing Liverpool. Four wins from 4, haven't beaten Liverpool in 10 years in a derby. Adrian in goal, they must be thinking, right, this is the time. Godfrey is obviously one for the future. He's England under 21, a 5-year deal. They got him for 20 million. Rafinha has signed for Leeds, a winger from Rennes. And there's a talk actually that Josh Cullen could be going to Anderlecht on loan. So that's coming from the Belgian journalist Christophe Terrer. So
breaking news. Big breaking news. Oh, and this is, you should do this.
I don't know how I can bring this to the people, to be quite honest. This is something, a person who's been very close to my heart, an individual who's been very close to my heart. It is Gunnar Soros. The light that kept shining, the light that you thought would never go out. Arsenal have made famous mascot Gunnar Soros redundant as part of their cost-cutting process, which is sickening and a blow to everybody who likes nice things in life.
God damn you, COVID.
God damn you, COVID is right. I always thought it was an asteroid that did away with the dinosaurs. Turns out it was actually coronavirus.
Deal or no deals in the books?
I signed for them after the Euros, and after my first day's training, I was driving home. I was actually thinking, regretting it, what have I done? Like I walked into a circus. It's amazing, isn't it?
OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Coming up on OTB Sports Radio, a classic interview with Ray Boom Boom Mancini on OTB Gold at 1 o'clock. Paul Rice's History of Sport from 3. Our Cadbury Roadshow is live from 4. Some great stuff here from Teddy Sheringham and Gary Neville. And then OTB Gold at 6 is Michael Conlon, the morning after his Rio Olympics exit. If you don't have the OTB Sports app, that's the best place to get all that content. Search OTB Sports in the App Store. We'll see you tomorrow when Owen will have his full tribute to Gunnar Soros ready to go. Take care.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.